Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a what-if scenario that's bound to surprise you. What if Naruto became Tenten's unexpected ally? In this story, a simple idea from Gai Sensei sets off a chain of events that bring Naruto and Tenten together in a way no one saw coming. As they meet and work together, their bond grows stronger, and we start to see a whole new side of both characters. Could this unexpected alliance change their paths forever? Well, you'll have to stick around to find out. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to like the video, comment your thoughts, and share it with your fellow Naruto fans. Your support means the world to me, and we're almost at 1,000 subscribers. Let's hit that milestone together. Now, let's dive into this incredible journey of Naruto and Tenten and see where their unexpected connection leads. A month had passed since Tenten learned about the boy she barely knew. She wasn't sure if or when she would see him again, though she hoped that he had finally become a ninja. At first, she had thought about talking to Gai Sensei about it, but she never found the time, and over time, she simply forgot. Eventually, the whole thing about Naruto faded from her mind. Now, walking home after a team meeting, she spotted the Ichiraku ramen stand, and suddenly everything came rushing back. Her mind began to swirl with unanswered questions about the boy, the most pressing one being whether he had ever become a genin. Her body moved on autopilot, turning toward the academy to seek out Gai Sensei, but she paused when she realized the time. Gai Sensei had probably already left the building. Tenten sighed and turned back toward her previous destination. Her gaze lingered on the ramen stand, and her stomach responded with a growl, causing her cheeks to flush. With another sigh, she walked under the stand's cover and sat on a stool. The girl she had met before approached to take her order. Ordering the same as last time, Tenten sipped the green tea provided by the stand, wondering if or when she might see the blonde enigma again. "Hello, Naruto-kun. Been missing you. You've been away for a while," came the cheerful voice of the ramen stand girl. Tenten turned to see a smiling Naruto wave back before sitting down on his stool. "Yeah, I was on a mission, and it took a while." The girl nodded, taking his order and heading to the back to tell the chef. Tenten watched from the corner of her eye as Naruto's smile faltered, and his gaze turned to the counter, lost in thought. His fingers began to circle a notch on the wooden counter in a repetitive motion. Tenten's eyes softened as she noticed the height he ate on his forehead, but her focus returned to the expression on his face. Something didn't seem right. It went against the normally exuberant Naruto she had seen. However, she quickly reminded herself that she probably didn't know everything about the orange-clad ninja. Her thoughts were interrupted as her ramen was served. She began eating slowly, contemplating how to introduce herself and ask what was on his mind, along with some of the other questions she had about him. Tactfully, of course. She decided to take the opportunity while he was being served, recalling what she had overheard him saying to the girl. "So, what kind of mission were you on?" she asked. Naruto looked at her, his face comical with two strands of noodles dangling from his mouth as he slowly slurped them up. He gave her a questioning look, his eyes drifting upward, likely noticing her height he ate before settling back on her. Well, my team was sent to escort a guy named Tizuna to his country and protect him while he built his bridge." He paused, but we ran into a little trouble along the way." Tenten raised an eyebrow. "What happened?" Naruto grinned widely. "Well, we ran into these two missing nin from Kiri, sent by this guy named Gato to kill old Tizuna. Me and my team totally kicked their butts, and Kakashi-sensei knocked them out." Tenten's eyes widened. A genin, fresh out of the academy, had faced two missing nin and came out unscathed? Swallowing her disbelief, she nodded for Naruto to continue. He went on to explain how his team convinced their sensei to continue with the mission, and they eventually encountered yet another missing nin, whom Tenten recognized from the bingo book as Zabuza Momochi, the demon of the bloody mist. Tenten's mouth dropped open in shock as she listened to the blonde recount the fight, including how his plan helped free their sensei from a water prison. But then his upbeat story took a somber turn as he described meeting a boy named Haku in the forest. "I was totally wiped out from training, and then I met Haku," Naruto said, glancing down at his half-empty bowl of ramen. "At first, I thought he was a girl. He was even prettier than Sakura-chan. He grimaced slightly and Tenten chuckled. He said he was gathering herbs for a wounded friend who was precious to him. He asked if I had anyone precious to me. Naruto trailed off, his gaze lowering again. After we talked, he left, and I didn't see him again until later when I found out he was the fake Hunter Nin who helped Zabuza escape. Tenten leaned forward, hanging on every word. And then? What happened next? Naruto finished his bowl, pushing it across the counter to Ion before looking back at the counter, as though searching for the right words. Well, before we went to the bridge, I helped Tazuna's grandson and daughter fend off 2 samurai thugs, then went to the bridge to help my team. He paused, then continued. Sasuke team got pretty beat up in Haku's ice mirrors. Haku was fierce with those needles, and the mirrors kept popping up everywhere. Even Sasuke's Sharingan couldn't help, and Haku knocked him out. Tenten was surprised. He didn't kill your teammate? Naruto shook his head. No, Haku, he was a good person, he said quietly, staring into the back of the ramen stand. Tenten felt a pang of sadness in her chest. She had never imagined that someone like Haku, associated with the infamous Zabuza, could be a good person. Naruto continued, his voice growing quieter. After that, Kakashi Sensei was about to kill Zabuza, but Haku jumped in front of him and got killed instead. He paused, accepting a new bowl of ramen, but his expression had turned somber. Tenten sipped her tea, absorbing everything he had told her. His story was incredible but believable, an unexpected and dangerous mission that had gone terribly wrong. But there were still details he seemed to leave out, especially regarding his first fights with the missing Nin and his encounter with Haku. Perhaps he felt guilty or just didn't want to talk about it. She noticed his body language as he ate quietly now, much more reserved than the energetic Naruto she had known. Curiosity gnawed at her. What happened after Haku died? She asked, keeping her voice low to hide her eagerness. Naruto slurped his noodles before answering. Well, that bastard Gato showed up with more of his goons and ordered them to kill all of us, including Zabuza and Haku. Zabuza grabbed a kunai from Sensei and charged at them, killing every one of them, then killed Gato himself. Tenten's eyes widened. Zabuza killed Gato? Naruto nodded. Yeah, but Zabuza was dying from his wounds, and as his last request, he wanted Haku to be laid beside him. He wanted to go where Haku was. He died right after. Naruto sighed and took his final sip from the bowl. After that, we buried them both and stayed with Tazuna until the bridge was finished. Then we came home. Tenten, still deep in thought, remained quiet for a moment before she turned to Naruto, who was staring at her with a curious look. Why do you want to know all this? And who are you? Startled, Tenten jerked back, then laughed sheepishly, brushing the back of her head. Well, to answer your first question, I was just curious, that's all. Oh, I'm Tenten. By the way, she said, extending her hand. Naruto looked confused for a moment before taking her hand and shaking it. Naruto Uzumaki. Once they separated, Tenten smiled. I've got to say, Naruto, I'm a little jealous. Naruto blinked. Why? You went on a mission that had you face missing Nin, and you met one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist. Naruto grinned, scratching the back of his head. I guess it was pretty exciting. Wait, 7 swordsmen of the mist? Are you talking about Zabuza? Tenten blinked. You didn't know about the 7 swordsmen? Naruto seemed genuinely surprised and shrugged. Guess not. What's so special about them? Tenten couldn't help but smile. She felt like she was getting a glimpse of who Naruto really was, a ninja with a lot of heart, but still naive about the things that mattered to others. As the morning sun rose, Tenten began her usual routine, preparing to meet her team. Her thoughts, however, wandered to the blonde-haired boy and the sword her father had shown her, which might or might not belong to him. Could they be connected? She wondered to herself. With that thought in mind, she asked her father if she could take the sword to Naruto. He agreed and reminded her of his comment from the previous day. If the boy wasn't interested in owning it, he would pay for it himself. Tenten arrived early at Training Grounds 14, where she found her sensei, Mato Gai, delivering an enthusiastic motivational speech to her teammate, Rock Lee. She walked up to them, and Gai immediately turned and greeted her. Good morning, Tenten. Are you ready for another youthful day of training? Tenten nodded and, holding the sword case in front of her, responded, Yes, Sensei, but I was wondering if you could help me with something. Gai glanced at the case curiously, then looked back at her, silently signaling her to continue. Tenten explained that her late uncle had received a sword from someone in the water country, meant to be delivered to someone in Konoha. Gai nodded, then asked, "Who is it for?" "Someone named Kushina Uzumaki," Tenten said, noticing her sensei's slight, initial shock at the name, though he quickly masked it. "I thought she might be related to Naruto Uzumaki. Am I right?" Gai's mind began to swirl with possibilities, weighing the best course of action. This could be a problem. The Hokage will likely need to be consulted, but my youthful student needs an answer now. After a brief pause, Gai finally answered, "It's possible, Tenten, but I can't say for sure." Tenten nodded, then asked, "Are there any other Uzumakis in Konoha besides Naruto? When I asked you before, you weren't sure." Gai shook his head. "At this moment, I don't believe so. But again, I can't give a definitive answer." Tenten nodded again, glancing down at the sword case. "My dad told me to offer it to Naruto, no matter what, and see what he decides." Gai smiled thoughtfully and replied, "In that case, Tenten, we should consult with the sensei. My rival might have the answers you're looking for. How about we meet him after our mission today?" Tenten smiled and agreed. Later, as Gai and Tenten made their way through town toward Training Ground 7, where Naruto and his team were reportedly training, Tenten spotted a tall man with spiky gray hair, facing away from them as he observed his students spar. Tenten quickly recognized Naruto by his bright orange clothing, facing off against the brooding boy she'd seen before at the academy. Off to the side stood the pink-haired girl, cheering on the other boy. Tenten noted Naruto's grimace as he glanced at her, remembering that he had a crush on his teammate, a feeling that seemed unreturned. When Naruto's sensei noticed them approaching, he halted the sparring session, motioning for his students to take a break. "Hey, Gai," he called. "What can I do for you today?" Gai gestured for him to come over, stepping aside with Tenten. The man told his students to practice stretches before walking over to Gai and Tenten. As he approached, Tenten noticed the orange book tucked under the man's arm, which he quickly stashed away. "Hello, Gai," he said, greeting them. "How can I help?" Gai introduced Tenten to the man, revealing that his name was Kakashi Hatake. After a brief exchange, Gai shared the details of Tenten's story with Kakashi, who glanced at the sword case in her hands. "Can I take a look, Tenten-san?" Kakashi asked. Tenten nodded, handing it over. Kakashi studied the invoice attached to the case before opening it, and carefully inspecting the katana inside. After a brief pause, his eye widened as he examined the spiral symbol engraved on the blade. Then he unsheathed it. He studied the Fuinjisa seals etched into the blade, his brow furrowing as he analyzed them for a minute or two. He finally returned the sword to its sheath and placed it back in the case. "Have you discussed this with the Hokage, Gai?" Kakashi asked. Gai shook his head. "I thought I'd bring it to you first. It seems harmless enough. Should we consult him now?" Kakashi considered it for a moment before shrugging. "I'll talk to him later, but for now, it should be fine." Tenten, still curious, asked, "Kakashi Sensei, do you know who this was meant for and if they're related to Naruto?" Kakashi, like Gai, took his time to answer, which made Tenten wonder if the connection was a closely guarded secret. "Well, yes and no, Tenten-san," Kakashi said thoughtfully. "I can tell you that the person is no longer alive, but as for her connection to Naruto, that's a bit complicated. It might be hard to find a direct link, but I'll talk to the Hokage about it." Tenten nodded, sensing that she was being kept in the dark, but not wanting to push the matter further. She didn't want to risk getting into trouble just for satisfying her curiosity. Instead, she focused on the main issue. Would it be okay to give this sword to Naruto? Kakashi looked over at Naruto, who was watching them closely, then turned back to Tenten. "That depends if he wants it," Kakashi said. "There's no point in giving him something he's not interested in." Tenten sighed. "Well, if he doesn't want it, my dad's willing to buy it from him." Kakashi nodded absently before turning back to his students, motioning for them to join him. The pink-haired girl looked curiously at Tenten as they walked over, while the black-haired boy stood a little aloof, hands in his pockets. Naruto, casually walking up with his hands behind his head, looked between Tenten, his sensei, and Gai, then gave Tenten a grin and a wave. "Hey, it's Tenten, right? How have you been?" Naruto asked, clearly surprised to see her again. Tenten smiled warmly. "I'm good," she replied, then turned to the two senseis for permission to bring up the sword. Gai gave her a thumbs up, and Kakashi nodded. "Actually, I'm here to show you something, Naruto," Tenten said, stepping forward with the case. Naruto blinked in confusion, but as she opened the case, he looked at the katana and asked, "What's this?" "It kind of looks like the symbols I've seen on those jackets." Kakashi nodded. "That's the symbol of Uzushio-Bikure, the hidden whirlpool village. They were allies of Konoha before they were destroyed in the Second Shinobi War. We wear that symbol to honor them." Sakura asked, "Did it come from there?" Tenten shook her head. "No, it was actually forged in grass country." Naruto, intrigued, slowly unsheathed the sword and noticed the Fuinjutsu seals. "What are these?" he asked. "They're seals, Naruto. They react to certain things like chakra, for example. When you perform them, they trigger specific abilities in the blade. For instance, if you use a paper seal with a design that holds an explosion, putting chakra into it will release the explosion. The sword works the same way," Tenten explained. Naruto nodded, understanding but still looking a bit confused about what was handed to him. He then slid the sword back into its sheath. Naruto looked at Tenten, then at his sensei. "So, why exactly am I getting a sword?" Kakashi responded, "It was meant for someone else, but now it's yours if you want it. However, you'll need to go through some kenjutsu training to learn how to use it properly. Don't want you cutting off your own toes, right?" He gave a trademark smile at the end. Naruto scowled. "Like I would do that, sensei." He stared at the sword for a moment, his thoughts drifting to what he knew about swords and his team's last mission with Zabuza. After a moment of internal debate, he nodded. "All right, I'll learn how to use it. As long as there's no boring book studying involved," he muttered the last part under his breath. Kakashi heard it and chuckled, while Sakura sighed tiredly at his enthusiasm. "Are you going to teach me, Kakashi-sensei?" Naruto asked. Kakashi thought for a second and shrugged. "Maybe, but I think I'll have someone else teach you. They might be a better choice than me." Tenten, relieved that Naruto was taking up the sword and that there was someone who could spar with her at her level, said, "If you'd like, I can help you with the basics until you get an instructor." Naruto was surprised but smiled. "Sure." Sakura, feeling a little left out, asked Kakashi, "Will Sasuke-kun and I learn how to use swords too? Or is it just Naruto?" Kakashi thought for a moment before responding, "Sure, if you both want to. But are you really interested?" Sakura took a second to think about it before shaking her head. Sasuke glanced at Naruto's katana before shaking his head as well. "I'm more interested in ninjutsu, not kenjutsu," Sasuke replied. Kakashi nodded, accepting their answers. He told the team that training was over for the day, as he had to report to the Hokage. Gai mentioned he had to go too, but he was inspired by Naruto's springtime of youth, causing everyone to look at him with confusion. Amused by their reactions to her eccentric teacher, Tenten asked Naruto if she could walk home with him since their houses were in the same direction. Confused but not unhappy about the idea, Naruto agreed, and the two of them began walking. Their journey was mostly silent, with Naruto quietly examining his new sword while Tenten thought about how to teach him the basics. But when they reached Naruto's apartment, her curiosity got the better of her, and she decided to ask him something that had been on her mind. "Do you really live here all by yourself?" Naruto, caught off guard by the blunt question, replied, Yeah." Tenten looked at him sympathetically. "Is it hard? I have my dad, so I don't know what it's like to live alone." Surprised by the question, Naruto struggled for an answer, looking down at the ground. "I don't know. I guess. Most of the time, I try not to think about it." He smiled a little. "But I do have Gigi, who sometimes comes by to treat me to ramen. So, it hasn't been all bad." Tenten, assuming Naruto was an orphan, was taken aback when he mentioned a relative. "Gigi." Naruto looked at her, confused, before realizing what she meant. "Oh no, Gigi's not my real grandfather, actually, but he's nice like one." Tenten nodded, understanding. "So, you're not completely alone, but you still don't have a family." Huh. She felt a little sad about his situation, but was relieved that it wasn't as bad as she'd imagined. The questions she had about him were slowly being answered, though new ones were starting to form. Still, she was happy with how things went today. "Hey Naruto," she asked. He looked at her. "Yeah, tomorrow my team has the day off. I thought we could go over some of the basics of Kenjutsu and sword handling. Are you available?" Naruto grinned. "Our team has tomorrow off too, and I don't have anything else going on. So sure." Tenten smiled brightly. "Great, come by my place. It's the Totosai weapons shop down the road. You can't miss it." Naruto nodded, and she waved goodbye before heading off. He stood there for a moment, watching her go, before heading back to his apartment. The next day, Naruto found the Totosai weapons shop easily. The sign hung above the door, with a katana and kunai carved beneath the name. The shop was open, so he pushed the door open, and a bell rang to announce his arrival. "Be out in a sec, feel free to look around," a gruff voice called from the back. Naruto could hear the sound of metal being struck and smelled the scent of melting metal. He wandered inside, admiring the weapons on display, until Tenten emerged from the back, carrying clean cloth for her father. She saw him and called out, "I'll be ready in a minute, Naruto. Just hang tight." She disappeared back into the forge. Naruto continued to browse, but soon Tenten's father emerged, wiping his hands on a rag. "Who might you be?" he asked, noticing Naruto for the first time. "Naruto Uzumaki," he replied, a little more quietly than usual as he studied the man. Tenten's father, Shin, was medium height with broad shoulders, a physique suited for someone who worked in a forge. He recognized Naruto's name and saw the katana in his hands. Tenten had already told him about Naruto deciding to keep the sword and get some lessons, so he wasn't surprised. "I'm Shin, Tenten's father. Nice to meet you, Naruto. Where do you usually get your weapons made or repaired?" Naruto looked a little uncomfortable. "I don't really have a place. Most of my gear was given to me by my sensei at the academy." Shin nodded. "Well, if you ever need anything, we offer discounts for repairs or new weapons. Think about it." Tenten came out carrying 2 wooden practice swords and motioned for Naruto to follow her outside. They went to an area with a dirt mound, and Tenten handed him one of the practice swords. After he set down his katana, he gripped the wooden sword. Tenten frowned as she approached him. "Let me see your hands. Your grip is all wrong. If you don't fix it, you'll run into problems," she said, gently taking his hands and adjusting his fingers. Naruto stiffened at the contact, his face flushing, but he didn't pull away. Once Tenten was satisfied, she took the other practice sword. "All right," she said, "let's get started. First, tell me what you think a sword is, Naruto." He thought about it for a moment before answering. "A weapon to stab and slash people with." Tenten chuckled at his blunt response. "Well, yeah, but it's more than that. A sword is an extension of yourself. It allows you to reach farther than a kunai would." Naruto nodded, understanding now. Tenten was pleased that he was taking this seriously and moved on to the next part of the lesson. "Now that you've got the right grip, let's move on to some defense drills. You can only block or attempt to block my strikes." "Got it." Naruto was a little nervous but nodded. Tenten lunged at him with quick, precise strikes, and though he tried to block them, he kept getting hit in the spots he forgot to guard. It wasn't long before he was out of breath and on one knee. "Well," Tenten asked, "how does it feel?" Naruto wiped sweat from his brow. "My muscles are on fire, and man, you can hit hard." Tenten nodded. This kind of training builds muscle memory and helps you defend better. After a few more drills, Tenten stopped and grinned. "You're not bad. You're holding your own." Naruto, still breathing hard, smiled. "I'll get stronger. Thanks for the lesson." Tenten nodded. "Next time, we'll dive deeper. For now, take it easy and think about what you've learned today." After saying goodbye to Tenten, Naruto returned to his apartment, reflecting on his first real practice. Despite the pain, he was excited about getting better at Kenjutsu. It was a step closer to his dream of becoming Hokage. Naruto stood in front of the mirror in his apartment, examining the new clothes he had bought the other day. With some reluctance and a heavy heart, he set aside his old outfit, which had been torn in several places after some of the D-rank missions he had been on with his team, as well as the practice sessions with Tenten. He remembered how frustrated he had felt when she suggested a change, saying his old clothes were restricting him, especially with his new goal of becoming a Kenjutsu user. Despite his initial stubbornness, Naruto was starting to appreciate the new look as he gazed at himself in the mirror. He wore pants that were a darker shade of orange and less baggy than his old pair. His black and orange jacket, he admitted, probably looked better than his previous one. He also had a crimson sash around his waist, securing his sword to his side. The reason he chose to carry it this way came from a recent training session with his temporary teacher, Tenten. Tenten and Naruto were taking a break after a training session, their practice swords resting beside them as Naruto recovered his energy. Tenten was drinking from her water bottle when she noticed him sheathing and unsheathing his sword repeatedly. A thought struck her. "You know, Naruto," she said, "you might want to think about getting something to help you carry that sword. After we're done for the day, I'll take you to the store and we'll see if we can find something suitable." Naruto had never really considered it. He just carried the sword in his hand without thinking. "So, would I carry it on my back like the Yambu?" he asked. Tenten frowned. "That's one way to do it, but for you, I think having it at your side is better for now." Naruto was confused. "Why?" Tenten sighed, picking up her wooden sword and motioning for him to stand up. "I'll show you. Try reaching behind your shoulder as if you're pulling your sword up." Naruto followed her instructions, but before he could fully grab the imaginary sword, Tenten closed the distance between them and tapped the tip of her sword against his neck, chest, and stomach. She stepped back. "Do you see? A fast opponent can strike you if you can't get your sword out in time. Sure, you could train to react faster or dodge, but that takes years of practice you don't have yet." Naruto was taken aback. He hadn't thought about speed being such a crucial factor, but he understood now. He then asked a question that had been on his mind. "Why do the Yambu do it then?" Tenten sighed. "Well, their training and experience aside, many of them were chest armor, so that helps them." Naruto nodded, satisfied. "So, having it at my side is better, right?" Tenten smiled and nodded. "Exactly. It's easier to defend against a frontal attack, and pulling the blade is much faster." Naruto understood, and with that, the lesson resumed. Back in his apartment, Naruto was pleased with his new look. After getting dressed, he headed out to meet his team. When he arrived at Training Ground 7, he found Sakura talking to Sasuke, who was giving her the cold shoulder. Naruto couldn't help but feel a twinge of jealousy. If Sakura were giving him that kind of attention, he wouldn't act like Sasuke. But then he realized that her heart was set on Sasuke. Could she really just switch over to him? It seemed unlikely, but Naruto was nothing if not stubborn. His mind drifted to Tenten, and he wondered if there were any boys after her or if she was interested in anyone. He couldn't be sure. Tenten came across as no nonsense, and it didn't seem like she would have time for that kind of thing. But still, something nagged at him. For some reason, he felt he would be upset if another guy were getting the same kind of attention she was giving him during their training. Why did he feel that way? Before he could think too much about it, Kakashi arrived as late as ever. "Hello, team," he greeted. "You're late," Naruto and Sakura chorused. Kakashi waved them off. That black cat kept getting in my way. There was no way around it. His eyes then landed on Naruto, inspecting his new clothes. Well, looks like you decided on a new look, Naruto." Naruto shrugged without responding. Sasuke and Sakura noticed his change in attire. Sakura looked him over before muttering, "There's still too much orange." Sasuke glanced at him for a second before turning back to Kakashi. Once the inspection was over, Kakashi shifted to a more serious tone. "All right, I have some news for you three. I've nominated all of you to take the Chunin exams in 2 weeks." Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura stared at him in shock. Kakashi continued, "Normally, you'd need more experience, but the way you handled the situation with Zabuza and his gang really impressed me." The unexpected praise caught them off guard. But then Sakura asked, "What will they test us on?" "It varies from year to year," Kakashi explained, "but it generally involves your ability to handle various roles, perform missions solo, and deal with tough situations." The team nodded in understanding. Kakashi grinned behind his mask. "Now, for the next part. Instead of team training, we're going to focus on your individual abilities, since you may end up facing your own teammates in the exam." Naruto was surprised. He was excited to face Sasuke, but could he really have to fight Sakura? After their training session, Kakashi pulled Naruto aside and told him he had found a Kenjutsu instructor for him. They were going to meet him soon. Meanwhile, Team Gai was starting their exercises when Mato Gai announced that he had also nominated them for the Chunin exams. Just like Kakashi, he told them to work on their individual skills, as their team coordination was already strong. While Gai worked with Lee on taijutsu, Niji approached Tenten and asked for help with a clan technique. The two went to a quiet spot, where Niji asked Tenten to attack him with long-range weapons. As she threw kunai and shuriken at him, Niji used his Kaiten technique, spinning at incredible speeds to create a protective chakra dome that deflected the projectiles. During their training, Tenten's attack started to slow down. Niji noticed this and called for a break. The two sat down with water and towels, and Niji addressed the issue. "You're losing your focus. What's distracting you?" Tenten shrugged, though she knew it was because she kept thinking about Naruto. She was impressed by how quickly he was picking up Kenjutsu. At times, she even wondered what he would have been like if he had approached weapons with the same intensity she had. But she kept those thoughts to herself. Niji, however, bluntly stated his opinion. "I think teaching someone like him is pointless. He'll only hold you back. People like him are destined to stay weak." Tenten's eyes narrowed. "You don't know him." Niji responded coldly. "The weak will remain weak." "He's not weak." Her outburst surprised both Niji and herself. But neither of them spoke of it further, and Tenten continued to help him with his Kaiten. Yet now, she was more distracted than ever. She found herself wondering why she had defended Naruto so fiercely. Normally, she would have brushed off Niji's words. But now, she realized she had taken pride in Naruto's progress. Hearing him belittled had set her off. Thinking about the blonde ninja, she smiled to herself. "I wonder how he'll react when I tell him I'm taking the exams?" Meanwhile, Naruto was following Kakashi through the village to a training area he had never been to before. Leaning against a post, there was a man in a Konoha flak jacket, wearing a blue cap with his shinobi headband tucked under it. He was a little shorter than Kakashi, but not by much. When he turned to greet them, Naruto noticed that the man had bags under his eyes and seemed to clear his throat before speaking. "Hey Kakashi, is this the student you mentioned?" Kakashi nodded. "Yep, this is Naruto." "Naruto, this is Hey Gecko, your Kenjutsu instructor." Hey cleared his throat. "Actually, Kakashi, Hokage-sama's having Gunma and me help out with the exams, so I might not be as available as we agreed." Kakashi nodded. "That's fine. Naruto's getting some basic lessons from another genin, so it won't be as intensive as we originally planned." Hey nodded and turned to Naruto. "So, Naruto-san, why did you decide to take up Kenjutsu? From what Kakashi tells me, you didn't even think about it before getting your sword." Naruto paused for a moment before answering. "I guess part of it is because we ran into someone like Zabuza." Hey nodded, recalling Kakashi's mention of their encounter with the demon of the bloody mist. "What's the other part?" Naruto grinned. "I figured if I'm going to become Hokage, I need to get stronger. Wielding a sword seems like the way to go." Kakashi chuckled, while Hey looked at Naruto thoughtfully. Naruto shifted uncomfortably under his gaze, but Hey sighed. "I'll give you some basic Kenjutsu instruction, but I'll be busy too. I don't want you to get too cocky though. The Chunin exam isn't a joke." "I'm not scared," Naruto said with determination. Hey nodded, understanding. "Good. I'll see you next week. And Kakashi, you'd better be sure your student's ready for the exam." As Naruto left with Kakashi, he realized that training with someone like Hey would be tough. But that was part of the challenge, and he was ready to take it head on. The blonde teen nodded and unsheathed his sword, passing it over to Hate. The man inspected it carefully, muttering something under his breath. Moments later, he pricked his finger on the blade, smearing blood on the side of it, before appearing to wait for something to happen. After a couple of minutes, he sighed and began focusing on the weapon before sighing again. He then looked at Kakashi. "Kakashi, come here for a second. I want you to try something." Naruto's laid-back sensei nodded, and Hate asked him to do the same, but nothing happened either. Kakashi then nodded at Naruto, and Hate responded with a nod of his own. "All right, kid, here's what I need you to do. Get some of your blood and smear it on the flat part of the blade." "Got it." Naruto, a little confused, nodded but did as instructed. However, unlike the two adults, something happened as soon as his blood touched the blade. The sword shuddered, then elongated, growing 5 feet longer. It transformed from a katana into a nodachi. Startled, Naruto nearly dropped it, but he caught himself, staring in awe at the weapon's change. He turned to Kakashi in hate, asking what just happened. Both men remained quiet, scrutinizing the weapon before Hate finally spoke. There are few Injetsu seals on this blade, Naruto-san. One of them is a blood seal, which activates when blood is applied to it. Naruto looked amazed, but also puzzled. But it didn't do this when you two put your blood on it. Why is that? We're not sure yet, Kakashi answered. But what I want to know is how we get it back to its original length. Hate thought for a moment, then walked over and examined Naruto's sheath. Can I take a look at that? Naruto-san? Naruto nodded, untying the sash and handing it over to the man. Hate quickly examined both sides of the sheath before nodding in realization. Now it makes sense, he said, striking the nodachi with one side of the sheath, which caused the sword to shrink back down to the size of a normal katana. Both Naruto and Kakashi were taken aback by the change. They looked at Hate for an explanation. Hate showed them the seals on the sheath as he spoke. In Kirigakure, they designed swords with safety features that allowed them to be sheathed like normal blades. Over time, this feature spread across the elemental nations. This sword has one of those features. Impressed, Naruto took back the sheath from Hate, noticing the seals for himself. Interrupting his examination, Hate instructed, "Now, try channeling some chakra through the blade. But don't overdo it. You've done chakra exercises before, right?" He looked at both Naruto and Kakashi as he asked. Kakashi nodded, and after a moment, Naruto did as well. He focused his chakra into the blade, and immediately it erupted into bright red flames. However, the flames quickly died out once the sword left Naruto's grip and hit the ground. "Well, that was a surprise," Kakashi remarked, glancing from the sword to Hate. "It seems like we're 2 for 2. Why is this sword reacting like this only with him?" Hate was staring at the sword, lost in thought, before he sighed and bent down to pick it up, handing it back to Naruto, who was now looking at it with some trepidation. "I can't say for sure right now, but it does seem like it's made for him, doesn't it?" He then turned to Naruto. "Kid, we'll meet here next week in the afternoon. Is that okay with you?" Naruto snapped out of his stupor and nodded in response. Hate nodded back. "We'll stop for today. I need to discuss something with your sensei. Tomorrow, we'll practice those 2 forms with your sword until you can do them without thinking." Naruto nodded, wrapping his sash back around his waist and securing the sword. Later, Kakashi Sensei, "Hate-san," he said before heading off. Once they were alone, Hate turned to Kakashi. "I just remembered something Gunma once told me about the Yondaime when he was part of his security detail." Kakashi gave him an encouraging nod to continue. "Remember how Yondaime-sama used to double-check the security on his seals when something concerned him?" Hate asked. Kakashi nodded, recalling his own teachings from the Yondaime. Gunma once said that the Yondaime always seemed focused on figuring out a way to protect his wife because of her unique chakra. Hate continued, gesturing toward Naruto's direction. As her son, it would make sense that a sword made for her would work for him, right? Naruto, meanwhile, was on his way to Tenten's shop to share the news about his decision to take the Chunin exams and show her the strange properties of his sword. He arrived just as evening fell, the doorbell jingling as he entered. It was quiet, and he couldn't hear her father working in the back either. Before long, Tenten's father came down the stairs to greet him. "Ah, Uzumaki-san, glad to see you. Need that sword sharpened yet?" Naruto scratched his head, feeling a bit sheepish. "Haven't really trained with it yet, Shin-san. Sorry about that." Shin shrugged and gave him a once-over. "No problem. What can I do for you then? We're closing soon." Naruto nodded. "Is Tenten around? I have some things I wanted to tell her." Shin shook his head. "Sorry, she's already in bed. Hard workout today. But I'll tell her you stopped by." Naruto sighed, disappointed that he couldn't share his exciting news with Tenten just yet. Later, as he left the shop, he noticed a strange cardboard box following him from behind. He sighed, already knowing what was going on. "Come on out, Kanomaru. I know it's you." The box flew off, and from underneath it emerged Kanomaru Suratobi, the short, black-haired boy with a long blue scarf around his neck. He grinned up at Naruto. "Hey, Niton, how'd you know it was me?" Naruto gave him a bored look. Who else would be following me this late in a cardboard box? Despite his odd entrance, Naruto was glad to have someone to talk to. Konohamaru noticed something new about his idol. "Whoa, your new look is killer, Nichan." Naruto grinned. "Yeah, it's not too bad." Konohamaru looked him over, and his gaze soon landed on the sword at Naruto's side. "Hey, that's the sword I saw you with when you were with that girl." Naruto, surprised by how closely the kid had been following him, nodded and took the sword out to show Konohamaru. The boy marveled at the seals and designs on the blade before Naruto sheathed it again. "I wish Ebisu would teach me about weapons," Konohamaru muttered. The two continued chatting as they walked, and Konohamaru asked, "So, Nichan, who's that girl I saw you practicing with?" "That's Tenten," Naruto replied, smiling slightly. "She's helping me learn the basics of Kenjutsu. I just met my official Kenjutsu instructor today." Konohamaru nodded, then asked, "Does that mean you're going to stop training with her?" Naruto paused, considering the question. The idea of not meeting with her anymore made him uneasy and a little sad. Maybe he could convince her to keep training with him when she saw how awesome he was getting for the Chunin exams. The thought of her cheering him on made him smile for some reason. Konohamaru, unaware of Naruto's thoughts, continued, "I gotta say, she seems a lot stronger than that pink-haired girl you hang out with. Prettier too." Naruto opened his mouth to defend Sakura, but closed it. He could see what Konohamaru meant. While Sakura had the girl next door beauty, Tenten projected a cool, strong aura. Naruto briefly thought about both girls' looks, but before he could dwell on it, Konohamaru was already ahead of him. The boy suddenly grunted and cried out in panic. Snapping back to reality, Naruto jogged ahead, rounding a corner to see two people, a boy and a girl, confronting Konohamaru. The boy had Konohamaru by the scruff of his shirt, scowling at him. "Little brat, watch where you're going," the boy snarled, wearing a black bodysuit and face paint with a wrapped bundle on his back. "Get it over with, Kankuro," the girl said sharply, wielding a large black fan on her back. "I'm on it, Temari," the boy, Kankuro, said as he drew his arm back for a punch, but Naruto arrived, shouting, "Let him go now." Both turned to face him. Kankuro scoffed. "This twerp hit me. He deserves this." "Go away, kid." Naruto unsheathed his sword and stepped closer. "I said, let him go. Or are you deaf as well as stupid?" Temari smirked, but Kankuro gritted his teeth and released Konohamaru. "What's your problem, kid?" "My problem," Naruto began slowly, "is you. Take a walk before I show you how to respect people." Temari raised an eyebrow, and Kankuro, on the other hand, seemed more amused than annoyed. "Are you really trying to act like a big shot, little man?" Kankuro sneered. Naruto smirked in response. "You know, I don't really feel like talking. Let's go." He swung his blade in a practice move, letting it glide through the air with ease. And suddenly the blade released a shockwave, sending a gust of wind past Kankuro's face. Kankuro's eyes widened. "Not bad," he admitted, before lowering his arms in defeat. "Fine, we'll leave." Temari grabbed his arm. "Enough. I'm not here for trouble." Then she gave Konohamaru a hard stare. "Stay out of our way." With that, they left. Konohamaru looked up at Naruto, wide-eyed. "That was amazing. What did you just do?" Naruto grinned. "Just a little move I've been practicing." Konohamaru looked at him, impressed. "I guess I'm going to need more training if I want to be like you, Nichan." Naruto chuckled. "Yeah, you've still got a long way to go." Both smiled as the night continued. A series of clashes echoed loudly as two figures were dueling it out with their swords. However, it looked to be a one-sided fight. Naruto was clenching his teeth as he blocked, parried, and tried to gain some sort of advantage against his teacher, who didn't give him an opportunity to take the lead. Hate and Naruto have been like this the last couple of days. After learning the neat abilities of his sword, Naruto was at first given the task to alternate between the two forms that his sword took. While the easiest one to get used to was when the sword lengthened to the size of an odachi, the flame form was harder for him, as it still made him jump when it did that. However, unlike the first time, he didn't drop the sword anymore. Also, Naruto and his teacher discovered that the sword couldn't use the flame ability in its Nodachi form, or vice versa. So, for a while, Naruto continued to alternate between the two forms. From there, Hate began to teach Naruto offensive Kenjutsu training. In a way, it was similar to what Tenten had done with him, as Naruto was mostly defending against Hate's attacks. Soon, though, his teacher encouraged him to try and counter his moves, and gradually Naruto was gaining the confidence to retaliate. Hate instructed Naruto not to use the Nodachi and flame forms of his sword during their spars against one another, as he told the blonde team that they were better to be used as a trump card in a desperate situation. Naruto had quietly accepted the advice despite being eager to show them off to his teammates and possibly Tenten. Hate soon called for a break, and the two of them sat and rested with Naruto breathing a little harder from the exertion. "You're improving, kid. You're still a beginner at this, but you're doing pretty good thus far." Naruto nodded, appreciative of the praise. Hate continued, "I heard you can use the Kage Bunshin Kenjutsu from Kakashi. Am I right?" Seeing the boys nod, he said, "Then tomorrow, I'll show you a technique of mine that'll work well with that." Naruto was about to ask about the technique when the two of them were interrupted by the arrival of someone. It was a woman who was wearing the garb traditionally worn by the Umbu, with the exception that she wasn't wearing a mask to hide her identity. She had long dark shade of purple hair, and she had strictly business look about her. "Hate, Hokage-sama wishes to speak with you and some others about the exam." Hate nodded. "Thanks, I'll be right there." He then introduced Naruto to her. "Naruto, this is Yugao Yuzuki. Yugao, meet Naruto." Naruto gave a friendly wave while Yugao smiled and nodded, before turning back to her boyfriend. "I'm still amazed to hear that you're teaching someone." Hate shrugged before getting up and sealing away his sword in a scroll, before turning to Naruto. "We'll call it a day for now, Naruto-san. Keep on practicing those katas I taught you, and work on becoming more at ease with the flame form of your sword. You don't want anyone to take advantage of that while you're hesitating." Naruto nodded and bid his teacher farewell, as he and Yugao then left. From there, Naruto headed back into town, glad for the reprieve from the strenuous lessons Hate was teaching him. His travel seemed to be in an absent-minded, automatic mode as he soon found himself at Totosai Weapons Shop once more. These past couple of days, he tried to come here often to see if he could catch Tenten, but each time she seemed to be either out training or sleeping because of overwork. Naruto had asked Shin, her father, what's been going on with her, but he seemed to be disinterested and said she's training for something. Without telling anything more, getting anything more from the man seemed like an impossible task. However, Naruto just wanted to talk with Tenten, nothing more. He was starting to miss their time spent shaping him up. So here, standing in front of her shop, Naruto pondered on whether or not to enter once more and ask for Tenten's whereabouts, or if she was in. However, luck today seemed to be on his side. You're going to be covered in bird crap if you stand there like a statue all day, you know? A voice teased him from behind. Naruto's eyes widened, and he turned around so fast. It was amazing he didn't topple over. "Tenten!" he exclaimed in joy and relief. The bun-haired Kunoichi chuckled in amusement before looking apologetic. "I can see I have made things hard for you to come and talk to me. Sorry about that. Dad told me about your visits to our store." Naruto shook his head. "He did tell me that you were training, but not for what. I'm not mad, just really happy to see you again." Tenten was surprised by the warm feeling she felt when Naruto said that, but she decided to disregard it for the time being, as she wanted to explain to the blonde teen why she's been such a no-show. "Well, it's good to see you too. I really haven't been avoiding you. It's just my team got nominated to participate in the Chunin exams coming up, and I have been training for it." Naruto's eyes widened, and then he grinned. "That's awesome. I have the same news that I've been wanting to tell you. My team is also going to be at the exams." Tenten was surprised. She knew his team hadn't been put together all that long ago. However, his enthusiasm was contagious, and soon she was grinned as well. "Great!" The two then went to a bench that was outside of Tenten's family store, and Naruto told Tenten about his new Kenjutsu teacher, Hate Gecko, and some of the training they were doing. He apologized when he said he couldn't show or tell her about what the seals on his sword did, as he had promised his new teacher to keep it hidden for now. Tenten shrugged, not being bothered by it. "Everybody has their secrets, and I sure as hell haven't revealed to you all that I can do. so no sweat. I'll bet I'll be seeing something in the exams, though. As will you, if you're lucky." Naruto smiled. "I can't wait." He then took on a thoughtful look as he remembered something Konohamaru asked him the other day. "Hey, I was wondering something." Tenten looked at him curiously before nodding for him to go on. Naruto swallowed a nervous lump in his throat before asking his question. "Can we still practice together after the Chunin exams when we're not so busy, like we used to?" The weapons specialist was surprised by the question and how anxious Naruto sounded. She thought about his question and what would be best. The blonde teen had finally gotten a real sensei to teach him kenjutsu and didn't really need her makeshift lessons anymore, as he had absorbed all that she could teach him. However, she knew she really enjoyed their time spent together, and, oddly enough, she had looked forward to seeing him those days. She paused as she realized that Naruto made her happy just by being near him. But why? Pushing these thoughts aside, Tenten gave the boy an answer. "If you want, I don't mind really. Though, if either of us become a Chunin, we'll be busier than usual. You do know that, don't you?" Naruto thought on that but nodded, but then he grinned. Cheekily as said, "In that case, I'll just have to work harder, so I can see you more then." Again, a sudden warm feeling went over her face by something he said. Feeling a bit overwhelmed and a little bit embarrassed, Tenten was having an urge to get away before anything more was said. "And anyway, it's good to see you again, but I need to get clean from my training today." Naruto nodded before getting up from the bench the same time she did and said, "Okay, I have to go too. I got training early with Gai Sensei tomorrow morning, so I need to hit Ichiraku's before heading home." Tenten smiled as she thought of that ramen stand and how she learned so much about the team those times she visited. She then stopped and, after a moment's deliberation, punched Naruto's shoulder slightly with her fist, playfully, as she grinned. "Well, let's do our best at the exams. Who knows? We might be up against each other in it." Naruto looked surprised by this attitude before he, too, grinned and also punched Tenten on the shoulder with his fist, slightly, in the same playful manner. "You got it? It's a promise." The following morning, Naruto made his way to the training area where he usually met with Hate, only to not find him there, but the man's girlfriend, Yugao, instead. "Hi Naruto, was it?" she asked in a friendly manner. Naruto nodded. "And you're Yugao, right? Where's Gai Sensei?" "He's going to be late," she replied. "He was summoned to the Hokage's office for a last-minute planning for the exam." Naruto nodded and was about to get comfortable and wait for his teacher when Yugao continued, and he was forced to stop. "However, he's asked me to look at your skills and make an assessment while we're waiting for him." Naruto nodded wordlessly and drew his sword as Yugao took out the sword that was sheathed on her back before the two started the duel. During this evaluation bout, Naruto was struck by the difference between the way Hate and Yugao fought with the sword. While Hate was about strength and skill, Yugao was about improvising, dexterity, and finesse. Thus, Naruto's body was having to work more to catch up and try to counter the Umbu soldier's moves. As the time stretched into over 40 minutes of swords play, she called for a break, and the two had a cool-down period, while just Naruto anyway. As Naruto drank his bottle of water, Yugao, in her head, formulated what she noticed from her observations on how the green Kenjutsu user was performing. It more or less coincided with what Hate had told her. She saw no real glaring faults in Naruto's form or his strikes when he managed to get in a strike or two. "You're doing remarkably well for a beginner," she told the boy, finally voicing her critique of what she saw. Naruto smiled, tiredly, but thanked the woman. Yugao then looked at the kid's blade and noticed something she hadn't caught before and decided to bring it to the teen's attention. "Do you have a safety line for your sword, Naruto-san?" Naruto looked at her, perplexed. "A what?" "A safety line," she repeated. "It's a thin, strong cord that wrapped tightly to the handle of a sword and the other end of the line attached to the user's hand or wrist. It's used in a way that, should you be separated from your weapon, you can find or pull it back to you." Naruto was surprised by this new tool idea he hadn't heard before. "I don't have that," he answered honestly. Yugao thought for a moment and then said, "Well, they are useful, but to be honest, some get broken when fire jutsus are involved. So, it's not a surefire way that can help you." Naruto nodded. Still, he thought that it sounded like a good idea and that maybe he should go see Tenten's dad and see if he has any in stock. Actually, Yugao continued, we Umbu have a method that can correct that problem with those cords. Or, rather, we found a substitution. What kind? Naruto asked, very interested. Here, Yugao paused. She had just been making an observation before, but if she were actually to talk about this, it would be giving a genin an Umbu tool. Debating on it in her head, she decided that it wasn't something that closely guarded within the organization, and that her superiors wouldn't likely reprimand her for teaching it. They're called chakra strings. She told the boy, and he looked confused by the unfamiliar term. They are strands of chakra that string down your fingers to attach to an object. It's originally a Sunagakure method for their fighting puppet division. Naruto was surprised by this information. So, your chakra grabs something? Yugao nodded before grabbing a kunai and throwing it into a post several feet away from them. Naruto then saw her pinch her index finger to her thumb before a translucent dew of chakra came stretched between the two when she separated the digits. She then threw her hand out and then with a tug, she dislodged the kunai that came back to her quickly and she then caught in her hand. Naruto was soon grinning. That was awesome. Yugao smirked, it's very useful. However, it has a flaw where you need to be able to have the object you're reaching out to in sight. If you can't see it, then there's no point. She then tossed the kunai to the boy and then nodded to him. I've done the demonstration. Now, let's see you try it. A week later marked the start of the Chunin exams for the village of Konoha. In addition to its denizens, saw a number of foreign ninjas entering the village, much like the trio Naruto had met earlier. On this day, Naruto, as usual, met with his team. They were then given a paper with directions by Kakashi on where they were supposed to go to testing meeting area. As usual, Sasuke was full of confidence and taking the lead, while Sakura was trying to mirror the Uchiha's bravado, and Naruto was coming up behind with enthusiasm. They went through the large entryway for the gathering of the potential students and found themselves in a large room with a lot of genin from other villages giving them a glare for being in the same room as them. Sasuke seemed to brush it off while Sakura looked around nervously. However, the atmosphere became even murkier by the arrival of the rest of genin from Naruto's graduating class. Ino Yamanaka launched herself in a flying tackling hug towards Sasuke, only for him to pivot and causing her to trip into Sakura, which then gave way to an argument. You're being too noisy, Ino. Her teammate Shikimura Nara drawled as he entered soon after her with his teammate Chuji Akamichi nodding along while eating. The Nara's attention was soon drawn towards Naruto as he was now seeing as having a sword on him. You've taken up Kenjutsu, or something, Naruto? Naruto grinned. Yeah, I decided to be even more awesome. You better watch yourself, lazy bum. Troublesome. Shikimura muttered before they were having others join them as well. Kiba Inuzuka, Shino Aburame, and Hinata Hyuga soon entered as well. Look, Akamaru, the rest of these chumps are here as well. Kiba said smugly to his dog. Shino said nothing, but Hinata approached Naruto and greeted him. Hinata had always been nice and supportive at the academy to him, and both he and she were friendly enough with each other, although he still wasn't sure as to why. Good morning, Naruto-kun. Naruto nodded. Hey, Hinata, are you going to be okay here? Hinata pressed the digits of her fingers together in a nervous fashion, but managed to control her stuttering. Yeah, I think so. My team and I have gotten stronger since we came together. Hinata, quit flirting with the enemy. Kiba called out, grinning in a joking manner. I'm not flirting, Kiba, she protested. Hey, Kiba, shut it before I neuter you and your puppy in front of everyone. Naruto grinned as he put a hand on his sword for emphasis. That a challenge, though? Kiba growled. Naruto shrugged before ignoring the boy and taking a better look at all those around their noisy group. Aside from those of his fellow genin from his academy class, he saw the same disturbing trio he had met with Konomaru huddled in a corner of the room and giving out a menacing soon saw Tenten, and what looked to be her team farther away, but it appeared she hadn't seen him yet as she was talking to her teammate with the bowl-cut hairdo, while the other one who had the same unique eyes like Hinata was looking like everyone and everything was beneath him. Before he could scope out anyone else, a large man with a bandana giving off a terrifying look yelled for everyone to be quiet and follow into the classroom for the first test. As Naruto went in, With the air of the place being as thick as tree, he mustered up his courage by reminding himself of his promise to Tenten. Grinning fiercely, he said in a whisper, "I got this." The first test of the Chunin exam was underway, and already Naruto was at his wit's end. He now having to deal with one of those things he hated doing, which was the focus of the first part of the exam, a test. Apparently the Chunin hopefuls, were tasked with answering these questions, and if they were caught enough times cheating, they were to be thrown out of the exams. Hinata, aware of his plight of being the worst test taker of their graduating class, tried to stealthily show him her answer sheet in hopes of him being able to pass. However, Naruto would have felt guilty if her offer to help him landed her in trouble, so he politely refused. Thus, he tried to rack his brain on what he could do instead. Time passed with no available answer, and soon the proctor for this first test of the exams, Ibiki, told the large group that those who were left are given the choice of answering a 10th question. Should they get it wrong, they would be forbidden from entering any exam to promote them from Genin to Chunin for life. Cries of outrage and nervous denial echoed throughout the room before Ibiki released some killing intent, and everyone settled. Tough luck, brats. This is now how things are. So, what are your answers? He growled menacingly. One by one exam, hopefuls gave in and quit. Naruto, from the corner of his eye, noticed Hinata about to raise her hand in defeat, so he stopped it by slamming his hands against the table, awarding him with the looks of everyone in the room. "Something you want to say, brat?" Ibiki growled again. Naruto nodded and stood up before shouting, "Yeah, screw you and screw your test. Even if I get this answer wrong, I'll still find some way to get up on top. I'll be the strongest genin ever, believe it. So do your worst." By the time Naruto had sat back down, the rest of the room's gloom and despair got dispelled, and an aura of defiance was building up. Ibiki watched them, internally chuckling to himself. And just like that, their fear is gone. He really is their son, isn't he? Are you all certain? It's not too late to change your minds. Seeing no giving in by the examinees and deciding enough was enough, he announced that they all had passed the first part of the exam. A moment later, after explanations behind the purpose of the test, the window next to podium shattered and a black bundle came in before unfurling, and a crudely written message within was nailed to the board behind Ibiki with Kanai. "All right, maggots, Anko is here, and it's time to get your worthless asses in gear." A woman with spiky purple hair and a ponytail, mesh shirt, a brown trench coat jacket, and an orange skirt was standing in front of the banner and was looking disappointed in the lack of reaction to her theatrical entrance. "You're early, Anko, and this setup was highly unnecessary." Ibiki sighed. Anko scoffed before turning to him. "What about you? There's more here than what you planned on. You're losing your touch, old-timer." Ibiki shrugged, but Anko was soon grinning wickedly. "Oh well, no matter. More lambs for the slaughter then." A number of the Chunin hopefuls paled, and some cringed at the utter joy in the woman's voice. "Now follow me, you maggots." Later, the contingent of genin with their teams were now at a fenced-in area with an otherworldly dense jungle behind it. Warning signs were posted on all the fences. There was a large clamor behind the teens before the woman, Anko Mitarashi, gave out her instructions. "Welcome to the Forest of Death training grounds." She crowed loudly. She then held up two scrolls, a brown one with the kanji for earth and a sky blue one with the kanji for heaven. "Your objective, to obtain the second scroll to the one we give you from a different group and then make your way to the tower in the end of the forest." "How much time are we given?" a genin from Kumo asked. 3 days, Anko replied. A murmur went throughout the crowd at this information, and Chuji Akamichi cried out, "What about food?" Anko shrugged. "Well, you do have teammates, don't you?" She grinned by the horrified expression on the young Akamichi. "Damn, you're a gullible lot. The forest has everything you need to survive on, and things you need to survive from. How can we get the other scrolls?" A genin from AIM asked. "Can we kill the other teams?" Gara asked darkly. Anko's swagger dropped a bit as she answered, "It's allowed, but not encouraged. Now enough of this chit-chat. Get your asses into the lines and get your scrolls. The second exam starts in 1 hour." Sasuke brought Sakura and Naruto over to him and told them of his idea to have a certain riddle to help identify who was who, as anyone here could perform the hinge and infiltrate them in order to get a scroll. What's the riddle? Sakura asked. How about, the forests of Konoha sure have changed? The correct response being, yeah, but at least the owls are still around, he told them. While Sakura nodded understandingly, Naruto squinted as he tried to put the answer into his memory, which wasn't the best. You got it, dope? Sasuke asked exasperatedly. Of course, you jerk. Unbeknownst to Naruto and his team, they were being observed by some of the other genin groups. Gaara and the Suna group were looking at them, while the red-headed boy looked between the blonde-haired teen and his black-haired teammate. Akusa Genin was standing outside of his group, eyeing Sasuke like a hungry predator. The female member of the Oto Genin group was eyeing Sakura in contempt. Finally, there was Team Gai. While Niji was looking over his gear with Tenten, the Kunoichi noticed that Rock Lee was not with them and found him looking over at Naruto's team, particularly at Sasuke Uchiha. Lee, she called out to him. Lee blinked but looked back to her as she walked up to him. Yes, Tenten, what's got you so interested? She nodded towards Team Kakashi and waited as Lee soon turned back and stared at the Uchiha again. I want to prove that hard work can beat natural talent. Niji doesn't believe me, so I want to prove myself against Uchiha-san. He then grinned a bright smile, imitating their exuberant sensei, and gave a thumbs up. You'll help me, won't you, Tenten? The bun-haired teen sighed, but didn't answer. Instead, she too looked at the fresh Genin team and at Naruto, who was scowling at his male teammate for something he had said. She smiled as she recalled the bravado the blonde teen showed in the first exam and how it had entirely turned things around on the examiners. She doubted highly that he knew what he caused in doing. But it was a relief to her that Naruto's start of this exam didn't end there. Tenten remembered the promise the two had made the other day and how she had offhandedly remarked that the two of them might be facing each other in these exams. We just might, Tenten thought, and a smile crept upon her face. Soon after collecting their scroll, the gates were soon opened, and the Chunin hopefuls' mad dash into dense foliage started. Team Kakashi's travel in the Forest of Death training ground started, surprisingly, with little to no trouble. However, 2 hours later, they found some dead Genin groups from the other villages strewn about the area. Alarmed, Sasuke made to make a warning to his teammates when they felt a large, violent gust of wind coming at them from the side, and then it plucked Naruto off of his feet and sent hurtling off into a direction into the forest. Naruto, flying through the air like a rag doll, heard a loud, audible hiss of a very large snake ahead of him. Turning his head, he saw the giant purple serpent open its jaw wide, intending on swallowing him whole. Shit! Naruto quickly bit his thumb and spread his blood on his blade, changing it to its Nodachi form. Then, just as the snake lunged forward to make a meal out of him, Naruto slashed at the snake's jaw, catching it on the side and cutting deep into its side, causing it to hiss in pain. Finally on the ground and having his bearings back, Naruto continued his assault on the reptile until the thing became a bloody, quivering mess. Then, with a loud puff, the snake disappeared into a cloud of smoke. Breathing heavily, Naruto waited for the snake's reappearance, and when it didn't, heaved a sigh of relief, which was soon lost as he heard a girl scream in the forest. It was Sakura's, running as fast as his feet could carry him. He knew he needed something more in order to get there faster. His desperation caused the Kyuubi's chakra flow from his seal and into his body, causing his speed to increase rapidly. He soon came upon where he had been with his team earlier and heard Sakura's terrified sobbing in another direction. Upon arrival, he found Sasuke clutching at an area between his neck and shoulder and looking extremely pale. Sakura was nearby, shaking fearfully with a kunai in her hand, looking at the person standing almost 10 feet away from the two of them. It was a tall man who had pale white skin and eyes slitted like a snake. He chuckled as he tuned to Naruto as the genin arrived and put himself between the mystery man and his teammates. So, the Jinchuriki has come. I thought my summons would have finished you by now. How interesting. Naruto, ignoring the man at first, called out to his male teammate. Oi, Sasuke, you still in there? Sasuke was panting in weak gasps and made no reply. Sakura was no better, so Naruto knew it was up to him to keep his team alive. Casting his favorite jutsu, 20 Kage Bunshins appeared armed with the swords by their sides. All of them, including the original, drew their blades and got into the formation that Hate had taught Naruto to use against a strong opponent. The man grinned nastily as he said, "You seem to be under the delusion that you can come out of this alive. I have time on my side, but not an infinite amount. So let me cut you short." Opening his jaw, a snake slithered out of his mouth, opened its mouth, and the hilt of a sword appeared. He pulled it out, and the snake went back into his body. The sword was jade in color and had a thin double edge to it, looking like a Jien blade. Naruto, feeling revolted by how the man drew his blade, focused and had his shadow clones attack the man with Hayate's technique, Dance of the Crescent Moon, making his shadow clones leave confusing afterimages as they attacked the man. Naruto also entered the fray, but was soon alerted as his clones' memories bombarded his head, and he could see that this man was not put on guard by the blonde-haired teen's attack. One by one, Naruto's shadow clones were cut down. The defenses and techniques Hate and Tenten had taught Naruto just barely managed to get the clones out of harm's way before their opponents skewered them left and right. Naruto was out of clones, and the mysterious assailant soon appeared in front of him and made a diagonal slash at the boy, who barely got his own sword up to block the attack, which threw him several feet away before shakily getting back into a stance. However, despite the advantage, the man was looking quizzically at the boy's weapon. Strange, here's a weapon that the Kusanagi can't cut. Curious. Then, using the Shunshin technique, he disappeared and reappeared in front of Naruto again and struck out, causing Naruto's sword to come flying from his hands and away from him. Naruto cried out in pain as the man stabbed his sword into Naruto's leg and then twisted the blade. The man grinned evilly before he heard Sakura's words. Please, stop." The Kunoichi had managed to gain the strength to stand and was offering their earth scroll and shaking hands. The man chuckled. "Do you really think I want that, you stupid girl?" He then looked to Sasuke, who was still breathing shallowly and had dropped to his knees. "Perhaps there's something you might be useful for. Killing the two of you might actually make the last loyal Uchiha reach new bounds." Pulling out the Kusanagi out of Naruto's leg, he then began to stalk towards Sakura as she looked on in terror. While the Kyuubi was healing the gaping hole in his leg, Naruto frantically tried to think of something to help Sakura as the man was getting closer to her. The blonde teen's eyes found his sword lodged in the ground almost 10 feet away. Then, without really thinking about it, he tossed out a string of chakra from his finger, caught the hilt of his sword, and yanked it to him, just as the man was pulling his arm back to strike at Sakura. Naruto launched himself forward, pushed Sakura out of the way as the Kusanagi then cut into Naruto's shoulder. Before the man could react, Naruto flooded his sword with chakra, causing the sword to burst into flames. Naruto swiped the weapon at the man's arm that was holding the Kusanagi and went through the limb like a hot knife through butter. The man grunted as he backed away, seemingly infuriated at this change and his damage. His eyes narrowed at the blonde, but soon looked out, distractedly, at another different direction. "My former apprentice is coming along with the Umbu." He then smirked as he looked at the Genin trio. "Luck favors you three, apparently. I shall take my leave, but remember this, boy. The next time we meet, I will make sure you feel death quickly. Tell Sasuke-kun that Orochimaru will be eager to see what he can do in the future. Goodbye." The man then disappeared entirely. Naruto waited until he knew they weren't in danger anymore before getting back to his feet. Pulling the Kusanagi blade out of his shoulder, he shuddered as he saw the man's hand and skin sink down to the ground before it turned to ash. Looking at the fearsome weapon, he remembered what Tenten had told him about taking away weapons enemies left behind as a way to ensure there being less of a threat. Taking a spare scroll, he sealed the weapon away and reattached the scroll to his sash before looking to his teammates. Going over to Sasuke, he could see the boy had finally passed out after whatever that man did to him. Finally wore him out. Thanking Kami for the Uchiha's resilience, he turned to his female teammate and found her still rooted to the spot, body quivering. "Sakura-chan, are you all right?" he asked, but she gave no response. He went up to her and gently shook her until she came to her senses and looked at him as if she was seeing him return to them after a long time. "In Naruto, Where did that person go? He beeped Sasuke-kun and Sasuke-kun. Her eyes went to the collapsed teen, and she found her strength as she ran to the boy, checking him over worriedly. Naruto felt a twinge of hurt at her not asking if he was okay, but begrudgingly accepted this as one of the things Sakura wasn't going to do for him. Surprisingly, he saw the second scroll, the Heaven Scroll, that they were needing among the items of the dead genin group that was closest to them. Naruto, assisting Sakura, lifted Sasuke up, and the two of them carried the boy to an open area near the tower they were supposed to go to. Naruto, while standing guard, looked worriedly at his male teammate, who showed no signs of coming out of whatever that man, Orochimaru, had done to him. There seemed to be a black seal on his neck where he had been bitten. Several times, Naruto and Sakura watched as the black mark seemed to be seeping out and spreading over Sasuke's face and body, only to retreat again. Neither Naruto or Sakura knew what was happening, but they both agreed that the best course of action was to get Sasuke some help. On the second day of the exam, the three found the entrance of the tower and appeared at its center, where they realized they were needed to open the scrolls they obtained, which resulted in summoning Gai Sensei, who congratulated the three on completing the second part of the exam. However, upon seeing their state and seeing Sasuke's condition, he ushered them inside and took Sasuke from them to be handed over to a member of the medical ninja division. Being told that they could rest for the time being, Naruto slumped on the floor while Sakura did the same. Naruto wondered idly how Tenten was faring as a smile appeared on his face when he recalled their promise to one another. Not too long after Naruto and his team had arrived had some of the other Chunin hopefuls came in. Luckily, the number of teams that Orochimaru had killed were less than what could have been. Later, Kakashi had came and informed Naruto and Sakura that Sasuke was doing better and that he would still be able to finish the exams. When Sakura pressed their sensei on what that seal or mark was on Sasuke, he wasn't very forthcoming. "It's serious, but not too serious, so the two of you shouldn't worry," was his reply. The time spent afterwards was just in congratulations for the rest of the Rookie 9 for making it past the second stage of the exam. Naruto was relieved when he spotted Tenten and her team relaxing in another area. On the fourth day, the groups who passed the second part of the exam were being ushered into an open arena where, to Naruto's surprise, his Kenjutsu teacher Hate Gecko was there and informed the massive genin on the next part of the exam, which he was to be the proctor. The first half of the third part, if these exams, was a preliminary one-on-one match between each of the exam takers. The second half of the third exam was the final part of the exam, and it was the continuation of the one-on-one matches. However, he let one piece of information be known that none of the genin had expected. Even if you win these matches, there's a chance you might not be promoted to Chunin. Hate coughed and cleared this throat before continuing. You're being judged for your efforts in the entire exam. So, it's possible that no one will be made Chunin this year. Keep this in mind. Having said his piece, Hate nodded to some Konoha Chunin members in attendance, and they handed out lots with numbers on them to the exam takers, and soon a board on the wall announced the number of those fighting. While a genin from AIM faced against one from Kyumo, Naruto's sleeve was tugged, and he turned to Sakura, who was whispering into his ear. "There's a team from Kiri that's pointing at us and whispering at us over there." Naruto, surprised, looked around until he finally saw what Sakura was talking about. The three from the hidden mist seemed to be in a discussion as they looked intensely at them. Then one of the genin nodded to the others and had started walking up to Naruto and Sakura, or more specifically, Naruto himself. The boy was as tall as Naruto, had blue spiky hair, black rimmed glasses that connected to some ear protection muffs, some gray and white camouflage pants, and he had a large two-handle sword on his back that made Naruto think of Zabuza. Without preamble, he asked Naruto, "You're Naruto Uzumaki, aren't you?" Naruto nodded. "Yeah, that's me. Who are you?" "Chojuro." The boy replied before shifting his stance and made a slight bow. "I personally want to thank you and your team for handling Zabuza-senpai and the others." The Mizukage also sends her thanks on this as well. Sakura wordlessly nodded while Naruto just reminisced about the man and Haku before shrugging to Chojuro. The boy from Kiri then said, "Mizukage-sama also would like to talk to you about something regarding your mother, Kushina Uzumaki," at some point Naruto-san. Sakura looked to her male teammate, who she noticed suddenly went rigid. "Naruto, Before anything more could be said, Hade announced the next number of the lot pairs, and Chojuro excused himself as it was his number that had been called. Sakura watched the boy go before turning to her teammate, who still seemed to be in a state of shock. However, Naruto soon snapped back to reality and looked around him for Chojuro before Sakura indicated to him that he was in the arena fighting Kiba. Turning, he saw the genin from Kiri getting attacked by Kiba's four-legged technique, where the Inuzuka's teeth and claws on his hands elongated, and he started fighting with the ferociousness of a wild beast. "Is that sword of yours just for show?" he asked Chojuro while the Kiri genin tried to dodge one of Kiba's swipes. "I've been instructed not to use it here," Chojuro replied. Kiba didn't say anything more as he then activated his next jutsu with his partner Akamaru, which turned them into a rolling buzzsaw and knocked Chojuro to the ground before he held a hand up and announced his defeat. A crowd started to gather in front of Naruto and Sakura, blocking their view, and when Naruto moved around them, he found that Chojuro had left the arena. Looking around, he couldn't see him nor his teammates anywhere, so he frantically started moving about the attendees in an effort to find the boy and learn what he knew about Naruto's mother, whose name he now knew. Meanwhile, Sasuke had come to the event and his number was announced along with his opponent, Rock Lee. "Yash!" Lee called out before jumping into the arena before facing Sasuke, who looked determined. "Uchiha-san, let's have a youthful fight. I'm eager to show to you my hard work," Lee said passionately before going into a stance. Sasuke made no reply, but his Sharingan Dijitsu was activated, and he rushed in almost at the same time as Lee, who became a blur. Sasuke was being treated as a human punching bag as Lee's kicks and punches connected without Sasuke being able to retaliate, much less defend himself, due to how slow his body was to counter against Lee's onslaught. However, the mark on Sasuke's neck pulsated, and soon it spread across his body and face, and he now had the power to build the speed to match the team. Before he could connect, though, Lee had jumped away and his sensei called out to him. "You can take them off, Lee." Everyone had a quizzical expression at this, but Lee just grinned enthusiastically. Leaping onto one of the statues of the arena, he lifted up his pant legs to reveal some weights that were wrapped around his ankles. Taking them off and dropping them, everyone murmured in surprise as the weights fell to the ground with a thunderous boom, making the ground shake. Lee then seemingly vanished before attacking Sasuke once more, his speed now tripled than what it once was. Sasuke, on the defensive once more, tried to jump away and perform a fire jutsu, but before he could, Lee kicked him up into the air. The air in his lungs burned as he soared, and then Lee appeared next to him, wrapping him up with the extra bandages on his arms before the two of them were dropping down to the ground, and Lee started spinning the two of them at a fantastic rate before jumping away from Sasuke as he collided with the ground and had blacked out. Winner, Rock Lee. Hade announced as a medic Neen came and took Sasuke off of the arena. Lee had tears of joy streaming down his cheeks as he gave an emotional thumbs up to his sensei, who nodded back in return. Naruto, who had seen the final moments of the fight, having paused from looking for the Kiri boy and was stopped from using Kage Bunshins by a Chunin who directed him back to the stage, felt a conflicted surge of emotions regarding seeing his teammate get beaten. Looking to his other teammate, Sakura, who looked worriedly after the Uchiha who was being carted off. However, she had little time to think of her crush as her number came up and the person who she was to face, Kintsuchi from Odo, was looking at her with barely masked contempt. "You got this, Sakura-chan." Naruto smiled as he gave her an encouraging push into the arena. Sakura slightly stumbled, but made her entrance in a cautious manner as she scoped out her opponent. The girl was a little taller than her with shoulder-length black hair, but her eyes were as warm as a snowstorm. As soon as they were squared off, she talked to Sakura in a harsh manner. "Are you sure you want to be here, princess? Unlike you, most kunoichi come to these things to show off their prowess, and not by trying to imitate a cheap whore like you are." Sakura bristled, and she took out a kunai as she waited for Hade to start the match. "Are you two ready?" Hade asked. Seeing their nods, he signaled the start of the match. The kunoichi from Odo threw something that went by Sakura's head, and soon she fell to the ground disoriented, and an image of the surrounding walls closing in on her. Her lessons at the academy came back to her as she realized that this was a jinjutsu. Before she could make a move to dispel the illusion, a tremendous pain came from the top of her head, causing the Jinjutsu to crumble, and Sakura now felt Kin holding her hair up in a strong grip, pulling the hair up viciously as she had a foot placed on Sakura's back, causing more pain to her head. I'll bet you're actually pretty proud of this hair, aren't you? Seeing how much attention you put to your looks makes you that much more of a failure as a kunoichi. Kin then drew a kunai in her other hand and made to end the match. However, before she could, Sakura swiped her own kunai through her long locks, cutting her hair off and surprising the Odo Nin. Rolling and then getting back into a fighting position, Sakura then did a leg sweep, succeeding in knocking Kin onto her back before Sakura placed her kunai tip against the girl's jugular vein. Winner, Sakura Haruno. Most of the Konoha genin in attendance gave an applause to Sakura's comeback, especially one Ino Yamanaka, who had a conflicted look on her face. Once Sakura had came back to Team Kakashi's group, looking a little subdued, the next pair was announced. Tenten versus Temari of Suna. Tenten had watched the fights eagerly, as she had seen some interesting matches. The Kiri boy who fought the Inuzuka had a rather unique sword on his back, but much to her regret, he did not use it, and instead fought solely with kunai. She was happy for her teammate in his win against Sasuke Uchiha, though she wished that Niji could have congratulated Lee as well, but instead was being his usual obstinate self. The fight between Naruto's female teammate against the Odo Kunoichi could have been better, but Tenten was satisfied that a fellow Konoha Nin had won a match. Now it was her turn. Judging by what she had observed of the Suna Kunoichi in her team, they seemed all business and had a certain aura about them that they weren't to be messed with. Tenten recognized the battle fan weapon on the girl's back and surmised that her abilities were backed by wind jutsus. Knowing what she was supposedly up against, Tenten was even more determined to come out on top. "You got this, Tenten. Kick her ass," came a loud, exuberant voice. Tenten could only sigh at Naruto's enthusiasm, but a smile was still etched on her face all the same. "You idiot! Did you really have to go and shout that?" Sakura reprimanded her teammate as Naruto looked on in anticipation of the match. He had chose to, momentarily, stop with his search for Chojuro and had instead opted to cheer on his training partner. He was eager to see what she had up her sleeve in this fight against one of the three he had met with Konohamaru. Those three still rubbed him the wrong way. The two Kunoichi stood stock still when Hade announced the start of the match. Then, Tenten started by, in a rapid pace, throwing shuriken at the girl, and with no surprise saw them being blown away with a wave of the girl's fan. Seeing that a long-range attack would be useless, Tenten took one of the scrolls on her side out and released a pair of Sai weapons. Taking the three-pronged weapons in hand, she charged at Temari, who smirked as she slightly held her fan open to attack. A strong gust of wind came, and Tenten rolled to the side to dodge before continuing closing in on the Suna Kunoichi. Temari leapt back to increase the distance, but had to use her fan again to knock away several kunai thrown at her while she had leapt. Two of the kunai flew past her and pierced the wall behind her. Temari then heard a sizzling sound and looked behind her to see that those kunai had explosive tags attached to them. Immediately, she cast a wind jutsu that surrounded her body with a protective wind which shielded her as the wall exploded. When it settled, she turned back to Tenten, coming to realize that the explosive kunai were a distraction. Temari raised her battle fan to protect her as the bun-haired genin assaulted her with Sai strikes. Tenten combined her frontal assault with taijutsu mixed in as she tried a series of roundhouse kicks and leg sweeps while trying to jab at the Suna Kunoichi's impeccably solid defense. However, Tenten was hardly at her limit, and she unsealed her next weapon, which was a halberd, and she aimed the pike/axe hybrid weapon at the girl's shoulders and arm. Temari then cast another wind jutsu and soared up and out of Tenten's reach, and was about to mock the girl for her predictable attack when she suddenly felt a chain and weight wrap around her ankle, which interrupted her ego-driven speech. Looking to its owner, Temari saw Tenten holding a sickle at the other end. The girl then used a surprising amount of strength and pulled Temari from her jutsu and slammed her to the ground. Tenten closed the distance, slid across the ground, and then knocked the battle fan out of Temari's grasp before holding a kunai in a reverse grip, placed the tip of the blade to the girl's head near the base of her skull. Winner, Tenten. Breathing heavily, Tenten got up and offered a hand to the Suna Kunoichi, who scowled at her before smirking and receiving the grip, pulled herself up before pivoting herself, tripping Tenten when she bent at an angle which twisted her ankle and caused her to wince as she grasped it. "Sorry, I'm just so clumsy." "Enjoy your win, Konoha Nin." Temari then walked back to her team, while Hade had a medic Nin come and help Tenten move off the arena. "What a bitch," Sakura said, frowning at the cruel, unsportsmanlike manner Temari displayed. Naruto scowled as he watched Kankuro laugh as he patted Temari on the back in mirth before the girl left the area. Hade then announced the next number, which to Naruto's surprise was his own, and, to his pleasure, was Kankuro's as well. As the two of them entered the arena, Kankuro noticed Naruto's dark look on his face and scoffed. "What's got your undies twisted, kid? Your teammate pulled something dirty, and quite frankly, I don't like all three of you bastards," Naruto remarked. Kankuro chuckled. "Ah, did my sister hurt your little girlfriend?" Naruto drew out his sword and went into a stance. "She's one of my precious people, and I'm going to make you understand that, dumbass." Kankuro's smirk fell from his face, and he took off the bundled object and placed it in front of him as Hate then asked if both boys were ready. After both nods, the match began. Naruto created 5 shadow clones, and they bore down on Kankuro and his bundle. However, Kankuro's mouth opened and a cluster of Senbon needles shot out and pierced each clone in its jugular, dispelling them in that very instant. Naruto did the same thing again, making 10 clones this time, but changed it up by performing the Kawarimi body replacement technique to swap with his clones and get closer to Kankuro. Kankuro's mouth opened again, but Naruto bit his thumb and smeared the blade of his sword. Using the Nodachi form, he closed the gap and swung at the Suna Genin. Surprised, Kankuro made to take a step back, but the length of the sword managed to cut off his hand. Naruto was surprised to see no blood coming out and that the hand made a clatter as it hit the ground, sounding as if it was made from something inorganic. Curses! The bundle on the ground came undone and Kankuro emerged looking upset. Naruto, confused at first, could see the chakra strings coming from Kankuro's hands that were attached to the fake Kankuro that Naruto had been facing. "You're controlling that thing, then? Is it a puppet?" he asked. Kankuro glowered at Naruto. "You're about to find out, aren't you?" The hand that had fallen to the floor had risen and became a knife which was sent soaring towards Naruto, who managed to dive out of the way. The still remaining clones regrouped and performed Hayate's technique dance of the crescent moon, creating the afterimages which seemed to block Naruto from Kankuro's view. "You're getting annoying, you damn Konoha Nin." Kankuro had his puppet open its mouth again and release its Sunbon needles before he caught another Naruto creeping up from the side and swiveled his puppet to launch kunai from its torso at the boy who dodged all, but 2 which hit him in the arm. Naruto suddenly felt ill and felt his left arm sag and fall limply to his side. "Oh my, you've been poisoned, haven't you?" Kankuro chuckled nastily. Naruto was starting to breathe a little harder, but he could feel some feelings start to come back to his arm, as be it the QB or maybe something else. He wasn't done yet. He watched as Kankuro and his puppet came closer, probably with the intention to end him quickly. However, when they were a mere 3 or 4 feet away, Naruto pushed chakra into his sword. With the blade erupting into flames, Naruto closed the distance, slashing and breaking into Kankuro's puppet. The puppet burned away Kankuro's image, revealing a 3-eyed, long-haired puppet that was now crackling and burning down into a husk. "Karasu!" Kankuro watched in horror as his puppet was almost becoming kindling, and he grabbed a kunai and launched himself at Naruto. "You son of a bitch!" Naruto's left arm, still not back to its usual strength. He managed to dodge Kankuro, whose attack grazed Naruto's leg, and he could feel the poison again. When Kankuro came at him again, Naruto put blood on his blade again, and, once turning it back into a Nodachi, brought the blade to Kankuro's neck. Kankuro pivoted and threw his kunai at Naruto. Naruto rolled out of the way, and then, changing his sword back to its normal form, put it under his arm and used the shadow clones to close the distance on Kankuro, aiming swords at his heart, head, and kidneys. "Winner, Naruto Uzumaki," Hate said with a satisfied smile on his face. Naruto was evaluated by a medic Nin to make sure the poison that Kankuro used had left his system before letting him return to the remaining matches. Upon his arrival, he saw that the other boy who was Tenten's teammate was in the arena being restrained by 4 Jounin instructors and also Hate. Wondering what had happened, Naruto looked on the other side of the team and saw Hinata Hyuga lying on her side with blood coming from her mouth. After the match between Hinata and Niji, it was the end of the preliminary one-on-one matches. There was a brief intermission before they would announce who would face who in the final matches in a month's time. During this lull, Tenten searched for her blonde training partner after having her ankle healed by a medic need. Luckily, she didn't have to search far as she found him leaning up against one of the pillars in the room, looking deep in thought. "Hey Naruto," she called out to him. At first she didn't know if he had heard her, and she was about to try again when he looked up and smiled softly at her. "Tenten, some exam, huh?" The kunoichi felt a little taken aback by how somber he sounded. She felt the need to address it. "Why so down? You were great out there. You've really got some skill showing, and those moves from your sword or something else. Who knows, you might come close to being as great as me one of these days." She grinned the last part and felt reassured as he was now grinning back at her. The way you took down that girl was really cool too. However, Naruto's mood dipped a little as he ventured into another topic. "I wish your teammate showed the same consideration for his opponent like you did with her, even though that Temari was a bitch at the end." Tenten now realized what was bugging him, and she couldn't really blame him. Niji's family really didn't make all that much sense to her when he would talk about them and his beef with those up above in the main house. However, while she sympathized with him, she still couldn't condone how he treats others because of it. Even she had winced at seeing the brutality he unleashed onto his cousin, who was only reaching out to him. Unaware of her thoughts right now, Naruto's eyes widened in a "I just remembered something" moment, and then he grabbed a scroll from his sash and held it out to her. "What's this?" Tenten asked curiously before accepting the scroll. "My team and I ran into some trouble in the forest and faced a really creepy guy. He was really strong, and luckily I managed to get his sword away from him before he had to run away." Naruto grinned cheekily before shrugging. "But I already got a sword, so I thought maybe you should have it since you use more than one weapon, or your dad could have it." Tenten looked thoughtful as she looked at the scroll in her hands. Before she asked a question. "Did you find out who it was you were fighting?" Naruto shrugged, said his name was Orochimaru or something. "The guy's definitely way off the deep end." Tenten froze on the spot. That name was famous, but for different reasons. The only one that mattered to her, though, was that his name was synonymous with someone Tenten looked up to and idolized above all others, the legendary Tsunade. One of, if not Teichi's strongest woman of all Konoha's history. She's a groundbreaker in the medical field, and she, along with Orochimaru and a man named Jiraiya, were known as the Sannin. To hear someone had met, and in this case fought against, one of the most notable shinobi of the village's history, and that someone being the boy in front of her, made Tenten at first doubtful. However, Naruto has never lied to her. She knew he didn't make up things to try and impress people. He may boast at times, but he was factual in the end. With this in mind, Tenten looked at the scroll in her hand with excitement, but also a little trepidation. Steeling herself, she unsealed the scroll, and what appeared nearly took her breath away. It was a Jin blade, jade in color, a double-sided blade that weighed hardly anything. Only one sword matched this criteria, and its whereabouts were unknown. Oh yeah, I think he called it a Kusanagi or something. She heard Naruto mention as an afterthought. However, Tenten didn't respond. She couldn't. Never in her wildest dreams would she have imagined that she would see, let alone hold, this infamous sword. What's more, Naruto had given it to her like it was the most natural thing in the world. Tenten, the weapons specialist, sealed the sword back up and did something entirely out of character for her. She pulled the blonde teen into a hug. The announcement for the upcoming matches came from Hate, who called the genin together. Naruto, still in a daze over the feeling of Tenten's hug, listened as the pairings in the matches were called. He soon heard his and was thoughtful after hearing it. He would be up against Niji Hyuga, Tenten's teammate. While he was eager to beat into the boy some humility and some sense on how to treat others, especially family, he didn't really know how to go about doing it. After the pairings had been called, the first part of the third exam had ended and they were given a month until the finals. Naruto decided he needed to speak with his Kenjutsu instructor. Unfortunately, Naruto couldn't find Hate, as after making the announcements, the man seemingly disappeared from there. So, Naruto looked for and found Kakashi instead, who was giving instruction to Sakura. Meanwhile, Sasuke seemed to be absent. Noticing his arrival, Kakashi finished up with Sakura before turning to him. We'll go over everything you'll need to know about the Aburame clan before you face him. Now go home and get a good night's rest. You'll need it for our schedule in the morning. Sakura nodded and smiled thinly at Naruto before leaving the two of them. Kakashi turned to Naruto. Well, it seems two of my cute little genin have made it far. Like I told Sakura, congratulations to you both. Naruto grinned and scratched the back of his head sheepishly before looking to his sensei. Kakashi Sensei, do you know what I should do about this Neji guy? Kakashi looked thoughtful. Well, yes and no. Have you talked to Hayate-san yet? Naruto shook his head. I haven't been able to find him. Kakashi, I smiled. He's most likely looking for you, Gao-san. You'll probably have better luck tomorrow. Seeing the boy nod in acceptance, he decided to voice his thoughts. As for what I can do for you, that's a little unclear. Between the two of you, Sakura needs more instruction. With you, I would recommend brushing up on the things you've already learned and maybe go to the next phase of the chakra exercises, which is water walking. Naruto blinked in surprise. Will that really help me against someone like Neji? Kakashi shook his head. It won't, but it'll help you in the long run. Hayate-san would be able to give you some ideas with Kenjutsu, but in dealing with a member of the Hyuga clan whose method is unarmed combat, I'm not sure. I imagine Gai, if not that girl student of his, has taught Neji-san how to disarm an opponent in a quick way. Naruto, knowing Tenten, imagined she and her team would be well trained in that regard. Naruto sighed and thanked his sensei before deciding that he wanted to ask someone about another thing that was weighing heavily on his mind, and the person to ask was his Gigi. Sarutobi Hiruzen was looking over some documents when he heard a knock at his door. Enter. The door swung open and Naruto came in, to which the old leader smiled. You've been doing tremendously, I hear, Naruto-kun. Both Kakashi-san and Hayate-san have made great praise about your efforts. You and your team have also been performing well in the exams. You should feel proud for making it so far. The blonde hired boy grinned, but soon looked down at the floor in contemplation. About the exams, Gigi, I met someone in them who seemed to know about my mother, telling me her name, Kushina Uzumaki. The Sandaime looked off to the side and thought about this. It seemed the boy finally was learning about his parentage, which should have been under tight wraps. That sword at his side was made for his mother, but from what Kakashi and Gai had told him, neither man, nor did young Tenten, told the boy this name. That meant only one other possibility. Did the man in the Forest of Death tell you this? He asked. Naruto shook his head. No, some genin named Chojuro from Kiri told me. He said that their Mizukage wanted to talk to me about her. He looked imploringly at his pseudo-grandfather. Gigi, why do they know about her, but not me? Is my mom's name Kushina? There was a pause as Hiruzen tried to find the best way to respond. You might as well tell him, said a voice from the open window behind the Hokage. Sarutobi sighed as a man came in through there and walked around to the side. The man was tall and had long, white spiky hair and a headband with a horn plate with the kanji for oil on it. He turned to look at the Hokage. I think it's time for this in any case. The blonde teen looked on guard as he looked at this new person, but turned back to the Sandaime, who sighed tiredly. I agree. Naruto-kun, first of all, this man is named Jiraiya, and he's one of my students. Secondly, yes, you are correct, your mother's name is Kushina. It was quiet before a look of hurt was on the blonde's face. Why didn't you tell me? The man, Jiraiya, answered for his teacher. Kid, you realize we are a village of shinobi, right? Keeping secrets is a trait of ours, and your mother is one of them. We needed to keep it a secret from you, Naruto-kun, because there are still people looking for information on her. The Uzumaki clan was proficient in seals and their special chakra. If someone were to learn that she had a son, you and the village would have been targeted. The Sandaime smiled kindly. We both know that you were excited by this, and you probably would have told Irika-kun and some others this. Am I right? Naruto nodded. That's how things start. Jiraiya said, soon, it would lead to merchants overhearing and then it would go across our borders and beyond our control. Naruto thought for a moment, and then scowled as he looked at the white-haired man. Then why was I told of her by someone from a different village? Why does this Mizuki's person know? Both men were silent until it was broken by Jersia, who sighed. Well, it goes like this. There was an incident when your mother was abducted by Kumobikure and was being taken back to their village. This news spread fast, and her rescuer was a boy from the academy she went with. Naruto gaped at this piece of information, but before he could ask what was on the tip of his tongue, Jiraiya continued. That event spread like wildfire, and a lot of the other villages heard about it. But there's another reason why Kiri knows, kid. It had a hand in destroying Yuzushiobikure, the village where your mother came from. Naruto's eyes widened in shock. My guess is that the Mizuki wants to apologize to you or something in relation to that. Jiraiya finished. Naruto thought about this and looked to the two men and grimaced. You told me she died protecting the village from the Kyuubi. Was that true? Sarutobi nodded. Yes, but there's more to it than that, which I think we can tell you now. Naruto, before you there were two other Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. Your mother, Kushina, was one of them. Naruto's eyes widened and his breathing hitched in his throat. What? Jiraiya nodded. Due to her giving birth to you, the seal got compromised and the Kyuubi got set free. It destroyed a lot in the village and killed many before the Yondaime was able to seal it inside you. However, Kushina didn't survive the experience. So, her protecting the village was true in this sense. Naruto looked to the floor and thought. Naruto-kun, I'm sure you have more questions, but it's getting late and there's something else I'd like to discuss with you. Is that alright? We can continue about your mother at another time. The Hokage asked kindly. Naruto didn't look satisfied, but he nodded reluctantly. I'm going to hold you to that, Gigi. Sarutobi nodded and then continued. I understand you're in need of instruction for your upcoming fight in a month. Is that right? Seeing the boy nod, he continued. Jiraiya here is willing to help you in that regard. Naruto looked at the spiky-haired man in surprise and a bit of suspicion. However, he nodded in acceptance. Jiraiya shrugged and said, This will depend on you though, kid. I understand you're receiving Kenjutsu lessons, but I gotta tell you that I can't help you in that area. Naruto nodded. I'll look for Gai Sensei for those. Jiraiya nodded. We'll meet up near the training grounds 5 area tomorrow and flesh out on what we'll cover. Then a big grin came across his face. But for now, it's time for some research. He nodded towards the Hokage. See you later, old man. He then went and leapt out of the window. Tenten arrived at her home in mostly good spirits. At the time, when she was reflecting on the famous sword Naruto had given her, they made the announcement that the person she would be facing in the finals would be that teammate of the girl she had beaten, Garo of Suna. Tenten faced a problem with that, as the opponent she was now set up against didn't show what he could do in the preliminaries. Garo's opponent had forfeited before the redhead could show his way of fighting. She was going to have to go into this blind. Entering her home, she was eager to show her father the Kusanagi. However, she then remembered that he was going to be out drinking with clients today and wouldn't be home until late in the evening. She decided to make it a surprise for him when he was sober, and in the meantime, she'd conduct some maintenance on her weapons before going to the hot springs to clean away the grime from the last couple of days. Jiraiya hummed as he positioned himself in his observation and documenting spot near a crack in the wall of the village's onsen. He reflected on what's been happening since, and before he came back to the village to report to the Hokage on the going-ons of the elemental nations. As of right now, the world was at peace, but it still felt very fragile. Kumo was quiet, as was IWA, and Kiri just ended its self-isolation by sending Jin into this year's Chunin exams here in Konoha. Suna seemed peculiar, and Jiraiya suspected something was in the works, but as to what he didn't know. The new village Odo had been quiet, but he was having difficulty finding out more about the village, so that was a problem. All in all, the world seemed stable. Jiraiya's thoughts turned towards Konoha and of the boy he just met with. The Toad Sannin was happy that the boy was doing good and that he was going to be given a chance to train him for a bit. It surprised the man that the teen took up Kenjutsu training so readily upon getting that sword, but Kushina and Minato had surprised him on more than one occasion, so go figure. Thinking on the boy's mother and her sword which the boy now had in his possession, he had mixed feelings. Jiraiya had found out that the sword was made in grass country on Minato's order, but for what purpose he couldn't fathom. It seemed that his late student had something in mind for the sword when it was to be given to his wife. Well, the fact that the teen can use his mother's sword when no one else could is definitely a boon in a way. When Jiraiya had learned that it had been a girl around the boy's age who had given the boy the sword, he felt inspired, especially since he learned that the same girl had given the blonde teen a crash course in swordsmanship. He knew Kushina would curse his soul from the great beyond if she were to learn Jiraiya had used her son as a character in one of his adult stories. Though tempted, he refrained for the time being. Putting these ideas on hold, he heard voices from the other side of the wall. As the women entered the bathing area he was observing, Jiraiya giddily began writing notes for his book series. Aika. Tenten sighed contently as she entered the hot water and settled next to a rock outcropping near the side of the onsen. She idly listened to the chatter from some of the other bathers, but her mind went elsewhere in its relaxed state. Feeling the warmth of the water she recalled the unexpected warmth she felt when she hugged Naruto in thanks for the priceless gift she was given. When he had awkwardly hugged her back in response, she had felt that warmth inside her grow. Tenten couldn't remember the last time she felt something like from somebody. She couldn't remember her late mother's embrace. But she hasn't hugged her father in who knows how long, but even then, she doubted it would bring upon this type of feeling. Being so serious about becoming a shinobi and being quite less girly than most girls she met, Tenten didn't really expect to be giving out any kind of affection openly to anyone or receiving any. At least not till today. Thinking on the boy who brought this all on, she felt a tinge of sadness. He never felt any kind of parental affection in his own life. And on that note, Tenten immediately thought of the name of the person who that sword of Naruto's was originally going to go to, Kushina Uzumaki. While Tenten felt guilty for not bringing up the name with the teen boy she had been training with, due to mostly having been putting it off for so long, she now felt inclined to bring it up with Naruto when she met with him next. It was the least she could do, as hopefully the two of them might find a link between this person and him. After all, it didn't seem like her sensei or Naruto's were going to be helpful in this regard. Feeling inspired, Tenten stood up and clenched her fist in determination before declaring in soft yet hard tone, "Naruto, I will help you find out about this Kushina person. As your instructor and partner, I will make this happen." She then wobbled a bit and her towel slackened before she retightened it. Getting a little lightheaded. Maybe I should get out early, Tenten muttered while placing a hand of her head before getting out and going to the changing area. She missed hearing a quiet voice from behind the wall, where she was next to previously, chuckle to itself. "Not bad, kid, you got a good girl in your corner. Kushina can curse me all she wants. This would make good material." By the time she had come home, Tenten had noticed that there was a light on in the window of her father's room, which meant he was back and probably was nursing a slight, inebriated stupor. While she frowned on him going on all-night drinking sprees, her dad was at least decent enough to not do it frequently. Coming inside, she saw him leaning on the counter with his back to her, groaning slightly. "Did Yoshida-san dare you into a contest again, Dad?" She asked out loud, causing him to stir due to hearing someone else in the room when he thought he was alone. "No, not this time, Ten-chan," he said, trying to straighten up. "It was a retired academy sensei, Yuriko-san. She likes to tell stories and have you drink with her after each one." He groaned quietly. Tenten rolled her eyes before she started to head towards the kitchen. "Sounds tough. Want some water and a remedy?" Her father nodded and then cradled his head in one hand before giving a deep sigh. "By the way, how's the exam going?" "Challenging," Tenten replied from the kitchen. "Some of the people there is something else." When she returned with the medicine and the water, her father thanked her before going into another topic. "Is that boy, Naruto-san, still in it? Have you seen him use that sword at all?" Tenten smiled, which her father mentally noted, before she got into a comfortable position leaning against the counter like her father. "He's been very surprising with what I've seen him do, Dad. He's really becoming a good swordsman and not just some wannabe flinging around a sharp weapon." Shin nodded before swallowing the medicine she gave him and downing the water. Speaking of him and that sword, Yuriko Sensei seems to have known this Kushina person when she was a student at the academy. Tenten's eyes widened and she turned to her father, so abruptly he was a little startled. What? Really? Shin gave a lopsided grin. Yuriko-san can really hold both her liquor and her memories from so long ago. Tenten encouraged him to tell some more. So what does she remember? Apparently, when this Kushina was a young girl, she was a transfer from Yuzushiobikura before the country got destroyed, had hair as red as her bad temper, and that there was an incident that happened while she was attending school. Shin then retold what the old school teacher had told him about Kumobikura abducting girl and how another boy from her class ended up finding and rescuing her. You want to hear the interesting part? Shin said, smirking, that boy ended up being the Yondaime Hokage, Minato Namikaze. Tenten was surprised. She finally had a clue about this woman, and it turned out she had been saved by someone who became Hokage later on. However, the story didn't end there with Yuriko-san's retelling. Yuriko-san also said that the two started dating as a result of that experience. Shin chuckled. Her last words were before she passed out was, heaven help whatever child those two would come up with her as a mother and the future Hokage as a father. As Shin resumed drinking his water, Tenten's mind reeled at this clue she now had. Suddenly, though, she had a jolt of a sudden idea that felt like an incredibly horrible outcome if it were true. She asked her father, Dad, when you did business with the Yondaime's office, what did the Yondaime look like? Shin thought for a moment before sighing. Well, he was a tall but not too tall person. Looked like a jack of all trades but wasn't overly muscular. He then paused before saying, he was a blonde but not the paler shade you see on the Yamanakas. Why are you asking this? Tenten didn't answer. Her mouth was open in realization, and now she really did feel lightheaded. Naruto looked at the crudely drawn map that was given to him showing where his Kenjutsu instructor, Hate Gecko's, apartment was. The teen had gotten it from Kakashi the day before, but decided to heed his sensei's advice to try and find his Kenjutsu instructor the following day. Thus here he was. Luckily, Kakashi's handwritten instructions were easy enough to follow. Naruto found Hayate's apartment complex and, going up to the second floor, arrived at the man's door. Naruto knocked a couple of times and waited. After a long pause, the door opened and Naruto saw his sensei's girlfriend Yugao there, looking unusually tired. Good morning, Yugao-san. Sorry to bother you. Is Hayate sensei around? He asked. Yugao took a moment before she stepped outside of the apartment and sighed wearily. Naruto-san, Hate isn't here. He's in the hospital. Naruto looked at her worried. Is he alright? Yugao took a moment to gather herself before replying, there was an incident late last night when he was patrolling and he was gravely injured. Naruto felt alarmed, but seeing Yugao in this state worried him too. But he's going to get better, right? Are you going to be okay too? I could take you to Ichiraka's to get something to eat. They always make me feel better when I am feeling down. Yugao managed to smile softly at the teen's concern. Thank you, Naruto-san, but I will have declined this time because I am due to go on my shift. She then sighed. I'm sorry Hayate-kun won't be able to teach you for a while, but if I have some time available, I might be able to teach you a thing or two if you'd like. Naruto smiled. Only if you feel up to it and have the time. I hope Hayate-sensei gets better quickly, Yugao-san. Later, Naruto headed to the training grounds where he was to meet his new teacher, Jiraiya. Naruto still wasn't sure what to make of the man. At first, he was surprised that the person was a student of the Sandaime, but even more so that the guy seemed to be privy to information surrounding Naruto's mother. That in and of itself made the blonde teen suspicious of the man. Still, Naruto was grateful for getting some instruction from somebody his Gigi had taught and was now wondering what kind of jutsus he would be learning. Continuing on, he came upon the training grounds where Tenten and her team usually practiced, and, to his surprise, he found the bun-haired girl there along with her sensei in the middle of a conversation. Seeing as how he was still pretty early to meet with Jiraiya, Naruto decided to say hi to the girl and her weird sensei. The first to notice his approach was the green beast of Konoha himself, who gave a big smile and a thumbs-up gesture. Uzumaki-san, what a fine, youthful morning it is. What brings you here? Tenten went rigid before turning and giving a welcoming smile of her own, which looked troubled compared to her usual ones, the blonde teen noted. Naruto had his hands behind his head in a relaxed manner and shrugged his shoulders. I'm just on my way to meet a new sensei, who's going to help me for the finals. Thought I'd say hi to you guys before going. Am I interrupting anything? Tenten shook her head. No, you're fine. We were just finishing up. Actually, there's something I've been wanting to talk to you about. Naruto. Naruto nodded, but Gai caught on to something the blonde teen had said that had him interested. I see you're getting some helpful instruction. That's good. Who might be teaching you now? Kakashi and Hayate-san are busy, I take it? Naruto felt a tinge of sadness and winced at the mention of Hayate's name, due to what he learned earlier. Tenten and Gai noticed his brief change of facial expression, but the teen masked his expression and then answered Gai's question. They are. This guy I am meeting with is some person named Jiraiya, and I guess he's a student of Jiji, the Hokage. Both Gai and Tenten were amazed by this news for different reasons. Gai was surprised but also pleased that the infamous man had came back to Konoha and was willing to teach Naruto. Tenten, however, felt it was weird that Naruto had now come across two members of the Sannin in such short time. Now, in this case, he was being taught by one. Add on top of that his Jiji was the Sannin sensei, and it seemed Naruto had a real connection with the Sandaime. She'd be lying to say if she wasn't a tad bit jealous by this news, but at the same time it confused her as to why Naruto, of all people, was being given these forms of treatment. She learned recently that Naruto's father might possibly be the late Yondaime. That might explain why, but she still felt bothered by it as there are things that didn't add up in her mind. If Naruto is being treated so well like this, then why does Naruto live alone in that side of the village, in such a crappy apartment building? Tenten thought in irritation as she was now confronted with even more questions. While Tenten wrestled with these thoughts, Gai decided to congratulate the boy. That's wonderful to hear. Uzumaki-san, you should know that you'll be learning from one of the most important people in the village. My ultra-hip rival, Kakashi, after all, learned from the man who Jiraiya-sama taught, the Yondaime Hokage. The area went quiet and Gai was puzzled by the looks on the two teens' faces, which both seemed a bit astounded. The Yondaime, really? Naruto grinned, but then his eyes clouded over. Funny, Kakashi-sensei never mentioned about that. I wonder why. He then looked to his stomach in quiet thought. Tenten came out of her shock before looking to her blonde, training protege in concern. Naruto? Are you alright? Naruto snapped out of his thoughts about his furry occupant and gave a strained smile, nodding, which didn't fool Tenten, who recognized someone who wasn't being honest about how they were feeling. Naruto then turned to Tenten and decided to change the topic. It's almost time for me to meet with this Jiraiya guy. What did you want to talk about, Tenten? Tenten, briefly, looked at her sensei from the corner of her eye, before judging that he probably would be okay with what she said. She hoped so. At least, turning back to Naruto, she took in a breath before deciding to lay all this out for the teen who she cared about. There's something I need to tell you about the sword you have, Naruto, and I am sorry it's taken this long to tell you. Seeing him look at his sword and back at her confused but nodding to her to continue, she did. There was a person who that sword was going to go to first who may or may not be related to you, but I think they are. Tenten, before you dash. Gai Sensei, please let me say this. He needs to know. Tenten said to her teacher, before resolutely looked back to Naruto. The person the sword was going to go to, her name was Kushina Uzumaki. Tenten noticed Naruto's eyes widen before he looked to his sword, and then back to Tenten. My mother, really? Now it was Tenten's turn to look startled. Your mother? Have you found out about her? While surprised and a bit relieved at the same time, this surprised her. Naruto, not taking his eyes off his sword, nodded wordlessly before he spoke again. Yesterday, this Jiraiya person told me, as well as Jiji. Gai had a surprised look on his face, but the eccentric man deduced that this sword had been what brought this on. So, maybe the reveal to the boy was an unavoidable conclusion. Gai thought this was enough. However, it seemed that his youthful female student had more to say to the teen boy. There's something else. Naruto, I learned that your mom, Kushina, attended the academy here, and a boy she went to school with might be your dash. However, she was cut off as a hand was now covering her mouth. Behind her was Jiraiya, who looked deadly serious. He then addressed her, Gai, and Naruto, all of whom were startled by the man's sudden appearance. We need to go to the Sandaime's office now, you three. Do you understand? The edge in his voice brought out no argument from Gai, and once he saw the pale, wide-eyed faces of Naruto and Tenten, nodding, did Jiraiya remove his hand from over the girl's mouth. Hiruzen Sarutobi felt much older than he usually felt as he listened how badly the security of the village's control of information was. An ex-school teacher and a young genin had pieced together what the Sandaime and Jiraiya had thought had been an airtight secret. Were he Danzo Shimura, he probably would have the former teacher killed and the girl and her father locked up somewhere, which would be a foolish idea at this point. It most likely didn't stop with the former teacher. There may be many others who have made the connection and weren't sworn to secrecy on the boy's parents' identity. Being the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi didn't help the flow of gossip any. Though, those who were in the know and were prejudicial against the boy were probably in denial of what they knew because of it. Listening to the girl's account of the ex-teacher's drunken recount to her father, and of her own suspicions, Hiruzen noticed her giving concerned glances towards the boy in question, who looked to be in a daze. Naruto had yet to say anything, but who knew how long that would last. By the time young Tenten had finished, Naruto did stir and looked at the Sandaime with a questioning look. Gigi, is this true as well? Hiruzen looked to Jiraiya, who sighed and nodded in silence to his teacher's unspoken question, before looking back at Naruto, nodding to the teen in silent affirmation. Naruto went quiet. Tenten, who was near him, put a hand on his and squeezed it, reassuringly. Gai, in the meantime, was standing at attention, doing his best not to intrude on this very personable situation. Jiraiya, with his arms crossed in front, drummed his fingers along his arm in anticipation of the questions that were sure to come out of the blonde teen. Naruto then brought his head up and looked at the Hokage. Is this why he chose me to hold the Kyuubi? Sarutobi nodded. With your mother weakened by childbirth and the immediate danger the Kyuubi posed to the village, there was no one else to choose at that crucial moment. However, I have another apology to make to you, Naruto-kun. Naruto kept his eyes on the Sandaime, who tapped out the ash from his pipe before speaking. Your mother, who never had anyone else know that she was the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi, except for a select few, asked me, before she died, that you'd be given the same anonymity on your Jinchuriki status as she had. That didn't happen, as we both know, due to leaks on the council. Naruto looked shaken, but he still looked at his Gigi, waiting to see if there was more. However, what came out next was the muttering of Tenten herself, which was loud enough that everyone heard. So, that's why all the teachers and the parents treated him badly. Looking up and seeing all of the eyes in the room on her, she realized her error and gave a nervous chuckle. Hiruzen sighed and closed his eyes. It is as you say, Tenten-san. Tell me, does it bother you to know of his condition? Tenten looked at the leader of her village, weirdly. Everyone knows a weapon and the scroll it's sealed into are two different things. Why would you even ask me this? Hiruzen had noticed that the girl's hand was still holding Naruto's, but the two teens were unaware of this. Still, the old man smiled. It is as you say. He then looked back at Naruto, who seemed to be in a bit of a better mood after hearing Tenten's thoughts. Naruto-kun, I know we told you yesterday about the importance of keeping vital secrets in this village. We kept a lot from you, mostly to protect you from those who, if they found out, would harm you after knowing. You're learning to protect yourself and prove your abilities as a shinobi of the village. There will come a time for such secrets to be unnecessary. For now, I need you to keep the secrets about your family's identity safe. The Yonde made a lot of enemies with IWA and Kumo, just so you know. Knowing that Kiri knows of your identity as Kushina's son makes it unlikely that others don't know as well, but we'd rather not kick this hornet's nest. Do you understand? Jiraiya also added and looked pointedly at both Naruto and Tenten. Both teens nodded in understanding. Gai, in the meantime, wiped some beaded sweat from his forehead. Though it had been postponed due to this development, Naruto was soon after taken away by Jiraiya for the start of his training. Tenten, in the meantime, was feeling somewhat satisfied by the explanations given to her. She felt better seeing Naruto not crushed by the information on his family, and that her determination wasn't for nothing. There were some things she still wanted to talk to Naruto about, but she knew he was probably eager to take his mind off things and focus on training. So she decided to hold off until the end of the exams. Now all she had to do was refocus on her training for the finals of the Chunin exams. However, she was still unclear on what to do since she had so little info on Gaara's abilities. Before Naruto had come to Team Gai's training grounds, Tenten was asking her sensei for advice on what to do. It would be foolish to think all the Suna shinobi fought the same way, and seeing how Temari and Kankuro fought, she knew that to be the case. As to what Gai could instruct her on, that unfortunately wasn't much, as he's still in the middle of training Lee on their signature taijutsu and had very little to offer Tenten in this. It didn't bother the girl that Gai couldn't really instruct her, as she knew Lee had a greater need from their teacher than she did. However, it came back to what should she do for this fight with no one being able to give her guidance and with nothing else to go on. It looked like an answer wasn't going to be that forthcoming, so she decided to take a gamble and read up on what Konoha knew about various Suna shinobi and go from there. So, kid, about what I'm going to teach you. First off, I'd like for you, if you're willing, to sign a summoning contract that might help you along the way. Jiraiya then summoned a large-sized toad which opened its mouth, and a scroll slid off its tongue to the toad Sannin before disappearing in a puff of smoke. Naruto, who was both shocked and amazed by the spectacle, took the contract from Jiraiya after the man had unfurled it. Just write your name below the one above. You should know that the Yondaime was the last person to sign this contract. The perverted man smiled as he saw the look of surprise and how the boy looked at his father's name in silence before signing his own name, before handing the scroll back to Jiraiya. We'll go over the hand signs and facts of summoning a bit later, but before that I'd like to tell you what else you'll be learning during our time together. The man said before holding up a hand. Soon a swirling ball of chakra appeared before Jiraiya slammed it into a nearby boulder and destroyed the massive rock in the process. Naruto was looking on in amazement. What was that? Jiraiya smirked. That was the Rasengan, one of the Yondaime's signature jutsus that you're going to be learning it as well. Speechless, Naruto nodded in confirmation that he had heard but nothing else. However, that wasn't the end of the itinerary of things Jiraiya was going to be teaching the young teen. With your opponent being a Hyuga, I have a personal jutsu that will help you against one of their hard-to-counter techniques. Jiraiya then smiled nostalgically before going on to the last of what he wanted to teach the boy. Your mother had a special jutsu that tied with her chakra. With any luck, you might be able to use it as well. It also will help against this Niji brat. He then grinned. Now let's get to the summoning practice before the hot springs closes. Naruto, surprised by the strange outburst at the end, nodded. Tenten sighed in frustration as she left the village's shinobi archive a few hours later from when she had came in. Unfortunately, she could find no outward clue or hint about this Gaara boy's abilities based on the records Konoha kept on Suna shinobi. She had hoped that there might be something on the gourd the teen redhead carried, but that didn't lead anywhere either, as there was no record in the archive of any recorded Suna shinobi using one. So, back to square one, she slumped off to get something to eat. Looking at the restaurants and food carts around her, nothing seemed appealing. However, she soon was in front of the Ichiraku's ramen stand, and she could only chuckle in amusement, especially when she heard her stomach gurgle. Later, after appeasing her appetite, she still pondered on what to do for her match, and was soon walking aimlessly before her foot travels brought her, surprisingly, to the Forest of Death training grounds where she had been to not that long ago. Tenten was about to turn around and go elsewhere when she heard some voices in the forest itself, and she specifically heard someone say, "Do you understand, Gaara?" Against her better judgment, the bun-haired girl ventured into the training grounds before she witnessed a number of people in a clearing in the forest. There was a tall red-haired man in robes similar to what she had seen the Hokage wear. Off to the side of the man were Temari and Kankuro, who were diverting their attention. Behind the two of them were two of the boys from Odo who lost the preliminaries of the third exam, Dosu and Zuko. And with his back to Tenten, who was hiding behind a tree more than 20 feet away, was Gaara. The plan must go without problems. With your brother and sister failing their initial mission, they'll have to be on standby until the time is right. The man said, looking down on the red-headed teen with authority and dispassion. Gaara didn't reply, he just looked somewhere else, ignoring the man. "What about these two?" Kankuro asked the man, indicating towards the tied-up Dosu and Zuko. The red-haired man closed his eyes. Their village has cast them aside and told us we can do what we want with them. He only spared them one look before turning and beginning to walk away. However, I have no use for the leftover scraps of someone else. Gaara, get rid of them and leave no trace. The man, Temari, and Kankro left, and only just then did Gaara's gaze return, and he looked coldly at the now quivering Odo Genin. Mother wants blood. Yours hardly matters, but it will suffice this time. Tenten then watched as sand came rushing out of the gourd on the boy's back before he directed it over to Dosu and Zaku, who were struggling against their bindings vigorously. The sand then enclosed around them and raised them off of the ground. Gaara then made a movement with his hand, and, to Tenten's horror, the sand then crushed Dosu and Zaku with them, unable to make even a scream. Blood then rose up and splattered the area. Not wanting to draw any attention to herself, Tenten quietly and quickly made her exit. Naruto left his first instruction with Jiraiya utterly tired. He had never expended so much chakra trying to summon a proper toad, with only just managing to summon a young toad that talked named Gamakichi only after summoning so many tadpoles. Now only wanting to savor some ramen from Ichiraku's, Naruto headed in that direction, but stopped upon seeing Tenten coming from another direction, looking white as a sheet. She soon saw him, and she looked a bit more composed before coming over to him. "Hey Naruto, are you done with training for the day?" Naruto nodded before he placed a hand on her shoulder. "Yeah, but are you okay, Tenten?" Tenten laughed nervously before shaking her head. "I just saw something I wasn't prepared for, and I am now even more unsure on what I should do for my match in the finals." No matter how relieved she was to see the blonde teen and feel some comfort after witnessing what she did, it was hard for Tenten to come right out and say what she wanted. Naruto, though, caught of a glimpse of something and soon pulled her into a hug. Tenten, surprised by the action, went rigid but heard Naruto saying something softly into her ear. He then pulled away, smiled at her, and said, "Want to come to Ichiraku's with me? I'm starving." The thing he had said in her ear was, "If you need help, I can do it. It's a promise." Tenten was in a daze before she realized he asked her something else after that and managed to get her spirit back. "I already ate, but I can keep you company though." She grinned. Naruto grinned back and then motioned her to him. "Shall we?" The Hokage, along with Jiraiya, Danzo, Himura, and Koharu, listened to Mato Gai's report on what his Genin student, Tenten, told him late the previous day about the secret meeting between members of the Kazekage's family in the Forest of Death training grounds and the supposed deaths of 2 Genin from Otogekure. The final report of Gai were of his findings in the forest and finding small traces of somewhat fresh blood but no bodies. Finishing his report, Gai stepped back and the elder members of this meeting talked among each other. "This supports what I've been trying to tell you for years, Hiruzen. Peace is failing and war is at our door." Danzo drawled, leaning on his cane. He probably would be the only one to get away with such thinly veiled disrespect, but no one in the meeting tried to reprimand the old war hawk all the same. Add to it Gekko-kun's attack while on patrol. It all spells out the plans of an attack on the village, Hokage-sama. Himura said, "Thank goodness Jiraiya-kun was there to save Gekko-kun after that happened. Otherwise, we would have lost such a valuable swordsman." Jiraiya nodded, but Danzo quietly scoffed. A shame he didn't see the attacker. The Toad Sannin slightly glared at the old war hawk before turning back to give his report for this meeting. Suna does seem to be gathering their forces for something. Hearing Gai-san's students' account of what they were talking about, it's safe to assume that they're not doing this alone. Odo, most likely, is their supporter. Those 2 Genin that died were unquestionably theirs. "You should imprison the Kazekage," Danzo muttered, "and risk even further retribution? Like it or not, they do have a legitimate complaint against us due to their foolish daimyo." Sarutobi sighed. The room went quiet before Kurinai Yuhi, one of the newest Jounin instructors, ventured a question. "What did the daimyo do?" Asuma, one of the other Jounin, answered her. "He redistributed the missions that were supposed to go to Suna to other villages, and we took in the most. This created a deep loss for Suna as a result." The Hokage nodded. "Thus, I can't do anything premature like arresting him or his children while they're here in the village for the exams." or I risk us being attacked by the other villages in retaliation for Suna. The best thing for us to do is to continue monitoring and setting up contingencies." Danzo scoffed and then limped out of the room. The rest of the discussion went to talks about heightening security, putting Umbu to tail high-profile guests, and make the Jounin ready for the worst case yet to happen. Later, Jiraiya was watching as Naruto finally managed to complete the second part of the lesson to mastering the Yondame's second signature jutsu, the Rasengan. It impressed the old toad Sannin how quickly the boy was learning and wondered if something had triggered it. Last time he checked up on the kid, he found that the boy struggled learning in the classroom. But here he was now, a hairbreadth away from learning an A-rank jutsu of his father's. The spy master had a big hunch it had to do with the time the boy has spent with that Tenten girl and with her helping him learn swordsmanship. Jiraiya was pleased that the boy made a connection to someone close to his age. By the look of how the two treated each other in that meeting about the boy's father, Jiraiya had an inkling that something was growing between the two. Whether or not they were aware of it was another matter. The toad Sannin idly wondered how the boy's parents would react to this girl. Tenten was a tomboy like Kushina, but she has the level of seriousness that felt the same to Minato. Personally, the author of Aika Aika believed they'd approve. Jiraiya smiled as he reminisced about his late student and his wife. "Quit thinking pervy things and tell me what to do next, Aro Sensei." Jiraiya scowled as he now regretted on showing the boy the newest book he had been working on, which brought on this disrespecting name. However, he grinned evilly as he used his counter. "You and that girl are going to make me a fortune in book sales, brat. Want to hear a preview?" The blonde teenager scowled, but then sighed, tiredly. "I keep on telling you, there's nothing really going on between us. But I'll bet you like there to be, right?" Jiraiya noted. Naruto shrugged before kicking one of the popped balls he had been using before on the ground. "I guess. The only other girl I really paid attention to was Sakura-chan, but she wouldn't even give me a smile and thanks." Jiraiya nodded knowingly as he has had a similar relationship with his own teammate, Tsunade. Naruto continued, "However, I don't want Tenten to hate me if she doesn't want to be like that with me. She's special, and I'm more worried about doing something to mess up what we have now. She's also very serious about being a kunoichi. Would she really want to be someone's girlfriend?" Jiraiya smiled. "I know someone who's serious like that Tenten girl, and even she fell in love, kid. So, it's not really that hopeless of an idea." Naruto looked thoughtfully at the ground before Jiraiya cleared his throat. "However, once you learn these things I'm teaching you, you can go right on impressing the panties off of the girl. So let's get back to it. You know what they say, work before pleasure." Naruto looked at the grinning old man with exasperation before listening as the man gave the instructions on the last part of mastering the Rasengan. Sitting at Ichiraku's ramen stand distractedly stirring her noodles in a tired daze, Tenten was unaware that the owner of the ramen stand, Tucci, was talking to his teenage daughter Ayam. Nodding over to the kunoichi. "Do you think I made the ramen too bland this time?" Ayam cocked her head to the side as she folded her arms and looked up. "I don't think so, Dad. Maybe it has to do with that exam going on in the village." Naruto-kun said that they were in it. As Tucci nodded in agreement, their favorite customer soon bounded up and sat on the stool next to the deep-in-thought teen girl. "Chicken ramen, old man." "Hey, Tenten, how are things?" The girl sighed and finally took a bite of the food she was stirring for so long. "Nothing's going on. That's my problem. I can't find anyone to help me with training." Accepting his meal, Naruto looked up in contemplation before turning to Tenten. "Well, I know someone who might be able to help you find someone, as she helping me with Gai Sensei still in the hospital." Tenten's head lifted up and she looked at Naruto with hope in her eyes. "Really? Tell me more." The two were seen later walking to the training grounds where Naruto was being taught by Hate. When they arrived, Tenten saw a mature-looking woman in Umbu gear talking with a woman that had started the second part of the exams, Anko Mitarashi. "Hi, Yugao-san. Are things getting better for Gai Sensei?" Naruto asked the woman in concern. The woman gave a soft smile but shook her head. "No changes. However, he's not in any immediate danger now." The blonde nodded. Yugao's attention turned to Tenten before looking back at Naruto. "I see you're not alone." Naruto grinned. "Neither are you, you know." He turned to Tenten while talking to his Kenjutsu teacher's girlfriend. My friend here needs someone to help her prepare for a match in the finals. We were hoping you might know of someone?" Yugao looked thoughtful before shaking her head in the negative. "Sorry, no. Everyone in my unit and those in my circle are too busy at this time." Naruto looked to the ground, disappointed, while Tenten shrugged in tired acceptance. She was about to tell Naruto that she was grateful that he tried to help her out, when someone cleared their throat. "Excuse me, since when do I not count among your circle?" Tenten looked at Anko, who was giving an annoyed look at Yugao. The Umbu member sighed. "I was counting you, Anko. Didn't you complain to me yesterday about how Abiki-san was giving you more work now that both of your parts of the exam were done with?" Anko snorted. "Yeah, I did. So what?" Getting only an expectant look from her friend, Anko looked away. "After hearing from you and Hade about training this blonde brat, it sounds like a good time killer." She then turned to the weapons enthusiast team. "I saw your match too, girly. You improvise and think on the spot. Compared to the other female genin in the village, they're a bunch of unimpressive little skanks. You at least have a pair on you." Tenten nodded slowly. "Thanks, I guess." She then skeptically asked, "But can you really help me train against that boy from Suna?" Anko grinned menacingly. "Oh, you bet I can." After separating from Tenten, who Anko dragged off to who knows where, Naruto had a refresher spar against Yugao, who corrected some of the holes in his forms that he was being lazy about. However, it ended soon after as another Umbu in a mask came to collect Yugao, and she stopped their session there for the day. Thus, with nothing better to do, Naruto walked through the training fields trying to come up with a method to work on. Before he knew it, he was soon at a different training area, and he found someone practicing their taijutsu. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be someone he was relieved to see. "Hinata, how are you feeling?" The girl was jolted out of her own thoughts by his greeting, and she turned shyly to him. "I'm much better, Naruto-kun. Thank you for the get well card and the coupon to Ichirakas." Naruto nodded. "Well, you're welcome. I plan on getting back against that Niji bastard for what he did to you." Hinata flinched at the mention of her cousin, but smiled softly that Naruto had this much concern for her. However, she shook her head sadly. "Thank you, Naruto-kun. But don't think too poorly of Niji and I-san. He has his reasons for feeling angry against me and my father." Naruto looked at her surprised. "Reasons? But he almost killed you. What reason could there be that makes it okay for what he did?" Hinata sighed and then hesitated for a moment before she finally began telling the blonde about what happened when she was kidnapped by a Kumo delegate. The result being her father rescuing her, killing her captor, and Niji's father taking Hinata's father's place when Kumo called for his head because they were twins. After she had finished retelling the story, Naruto now had more of a conflicted look on his face. Hinata, feeling a bit guilty for bringing Naruto down with her family woes, decided to change the subject. "I forgot to tell you, congratulations on making it to the finals, Naruto-kun." Naruto snapped out of his thoughts and grinned sheepishly. "Thanks." Hinata pressed her index fingers together, shyly. "I'm glad both of you made it through." Naruto blinked. "Both of us?" Hinata laughed nervously. "And nothing, never mind." Later, watching Naruto leave to go home, Hinata smiled as she remembered the crush she had and maybe still has on the blonde. He served as an inspiration for her at the academy on how to try and conquer doubt with determination, something she struggles with. Yes, Naruto and her teammate, Kiba, had drawn her attention and gratitude. With Kiba, it was his confidence in himself and loyalty to his team. When she was bedridden after recovering from her cousin's onslaught, he visited her often and stayed to talk to her about the matches and how grateful he was that she was okay. Still watching the blonde's disappearing figure, she remembered feeling conflicted when she heard Naruto call out, encouragingly, to Tenten at the start of her match. There was no mistake, Hinata's crush seemed interested in the older girl in a more passionate way. It hurt a little, but she knew that she had never opened herself to him because of her shyness. Smiling sadly, Hinata sighed before getting her things and making her own way home. The village of Konoha was seeing a steady flow of visitors as the day of the finals of the exams was approaching. While security was tightened because of suspicion of an attack, there were some exceptions being made. Important dignitaries and some high profilers were allowed passage. One person, especially was given permission even though they were trying their best to be unrecognizable. A woman of tall stature was dressed in heavy clothing with a hood covering her hair, wore glasses, and did her best to be unassuming. However, despite her best methods and cosmetics applied, the chunin on duty recognized the faint mark of the purple diamond on her forehead, which she couldn't fully conceal. His reason for not announcing her identity was simple. He owed the woman a favor for saving his niece's life when the girl was in the hospital. Thus, he let her through with no commotion. Yes, Tsunade of the Sannin had come to Konoha, a place she had previously condemned and vowed never to return to. Her reason for coming back? Not that complicated. That Lee kid is good odds, but not as good as this Gara brat from Suna. Interesting. The betting pool was what drew this bee back to the hive. Meanwhile, another of the Sannin was present in the village, but in a more secluded spot. Things are going splendidly. Wouldn't you agree, Kazakage-san? Raza, the Kazakage of the village of Sunagakure, looked at the speaker with some wariness. Ever since entering a deal with the Snake Sannin, the Kazakage had been warned by most of his retinue that making a deal with this devil was sure to come with cost he'd be regretting. However, due to their daimyo's neglect, he felt like the village and himself was in danger already. It seems like Konoha has no knowledge thus far, but we've had some close calls, Raza said. Orochimaru chuckled. Yes, but this village is still soft on the underbelly. A lot goes unnoticed. The Kazakage still was surprised the level of nastiness and uncaringness one student of the Sandaime felt towards his home. Thinking on it, he imagined his own son Gara would probably feel the same further down the road, if he ever ended up that far. Taking his mind off of his family matters, Raza sighed and looked at his benefactor in the eyes. Is there anything more you want for Suna to do in preparation? Orochimaru looked up in thought, but shook his head. You'll wait for our signal as planned. Otherwise, no. The Kazakage nodded before taking his leave. Then I will leave the rest to you. Watching him go, Orochimaru thought about one of his genin that had gone missing. Kintsuchi, after her failure against her match against Sakura Haruno, had gone missing when he called for her and her teammates to meet with him. He doubted that one of his dogs would bite the hand that fed them, but in the end she knew virtually nothing. The Snake Sannin had sent one of his tools to find her, but hasn't heard anything since. Possibly the village had captured both, but that was debatable. So far it was on alert, but not high alert. In the end, it was of no consequence. This village was doomed. Looking at where the Kazakage had been, Orochimaru grinned to himself and thought, yes, doomed. The same as some others. My apologies, Raza-san, but I'm going to put you to good use. With the following day being the start of the finals of the Chunin exams, the hustle and bustle of the village of Konoha was rather lively this morning. Among the crowd was Tsunade, who was looking over a statistics sheet supplied to her by one of the other gamblers she met at the betting booths. There were some surprising favors in this year's exam, but not surprisingly, the clans and powerhouses were given the best odds out of the examinees. The legendary sucker mused about how preferences never seemed to change after all these years. Planning on visiting a bar before deciding on her bets, Tsunade made a detour through an alleyway and made her way until she heard the gasping of someone who definitely was in some sort of pain. The slug Sannin's first instinct was to ignore it, as she didn't want her presence known to her sensei and the old fossils on the council, lest she get roped back into helping the village. However, just as she was going to continue on, she paused and sighed in irritation. Despite her uncaring attitude, she had a creed as a medical professional. She wouldn't turn away from someone in dire need. Thus, she deviated from her destination and followed a series of weaving alleyways until she came into an area where there were two people. One was a man in garb that didn't stand out too much, collapsed on top of a girl with long black hair. It wasn't a rape scene, as both were clothed, and the man was not moving while the girl below him seemed to be gritting her teeth in pain. Tsunade came right over and lifted the man off the girl and placed him on his back. There, on his chest, was a kunai protruding from where his heart would be. It was easy to see that the man was dead. Turning to the girl, Tsunade noticed that her wounds from, obviously, fighting the man were serious, but not too serious. If she got her wounds treated, then she wouldn't risk dying from blood loss. Thinking on different ways to approach this without announcing her presence in the village, the medic was stopped by the girl, who grabbed her wrist in desperation. P, please. H, help me. Tsunade sighed in exasperation before nodding to the girl and began healing the girl's wounds with her chakra. Moments later, the girl was out of danger. Kintsuchi, realizing as such, was without her usual arrogant personality as she thanked the woman who she didn't know the identity of. Thanks, Tsunade nodded. You just got lucky, Brad. No thanks needed. Kin closed her eyes and was feeling really tired, and before she passed out said, I'm not used to be treated this well. I hope this village survives since they have someone like you. Later, Tsunade decided to leave the girl at the Chunin guard station, where Kin was later taken into custody. In the afternoon, Naruto was feeling rather good about himself, as he completed almost all of the things Jiraiya wanted to teach him. Summoning seemed to be the trickiest, as Jiraiya had wanted Naruto to use the Kyuubi's chakra to go beyond with the summoning. However, before they could go any further, they ran out of time, and Jiraiya decided to approach it at another time after the exams. Besides Toad's summoning, the other hardest ability to learn was that of his mother's chakra ability, or, as Naruto learned, an Uzumaki ability. It was worth it though, in the blonde teen's view, as he now had two things of his deceased parents he could use in order to honor them and hopefully make them proud in the great beyond. Jiraiya gave the day before the finals a day of rest for the genin. So, Naruto, still full of energy, was walking around the village before finding himself at the Totosai weapons store like so many times before. There was a sign out front promoting a sale in lieu of the exams, which didn't surprise the blonde teenager. Knowing that unless he was there to make a repair or shop, Shin, Tenten's father, would most likely ask Naruto to come by another time. Another reason Naruto usually came by here was to check up on Tenten, as she was absent ever since getting instructions by that Anko woman who kind of freaked Naruto out. Seeing as he had little to do here, and if Tenten was at home, she'd probably be resting, Naruto turned on his heel and was about to leave when he heard the door to the weapons shop open and the weapons enthusiast's voice shouting behind her shoulder. Yeah, I know I got it, Dad. Quit badgering me about not being able to help out more. I got the exams and a woman who's determined to make me bleed every time I see her on my back already. The girl slammed the door shut behind her and exhaled in exhaustion before her eyes saw Naruto not so far from her home. Naruto! Perfect timing. I need a target to vent off on. Come and be my live training dummy for a while. Naruto paled, but before he could make a run for it, the girl disappeared in a body flicker technique before reappearing next to him with her hand grabbing a hold of his jacket. So he didn't escape. Did I say you had the option of saying no? She said, smiling sweetly. Later, a severely nicked Naruto with cuts on his body and a satisfied, smiling Tenten were leaving the training area. Ah, I've worked up an appetite with that little exercise, the kunoichi said, stretching. How about Dash? No, I've been to Ichiraku's enough. Pick someplace else, Naruto. The blonde, scratching at his itching cuts, thought for a moment. Well, there's that place that Chuji always eats at, Yakiniku's barbecue. Tenten nodded. All right, let's go there. The two teens went at a leisurely pace before arriving at the restaurant. There were quite a few others there, but the place wasn't packed. Coming up to the counter, the two of them ordered with Tenten, getting a hamburger, while Naruto ordered some spare ribs. The two ate in silence, and then talked over the drinks of the restaurant. The finals are tomorrow, it looks like. Tenten sighed wistfully. Naruto nodded. I wonder how many of us are going to be promoted to Chunin? Tenten shrugged. I don't know, maybe no one. Your Kenjutsu sensei did say that could happen. Thinking about hate made Naruto smile. Tenten, seeing his smile, decided to ask him something she has been wondering. By the way, speaking of senseis, what's it like being trained by Jiraiya of the Sannin? Naruto looked up and thought before grimacing. He's a good teacher whenever he's not being a pervert. A pervert? Tenten asked, surprised. Naruto nodded. You know those little orange books with the adult covers that people like Kakashi-sensei read? He's the author of those. Tenten's eyes widened before she looked away in wonder. However, she looked back to Naruto as he was refilling his drink from the pitcher on the table. I hope he's not teaching you how to write smut. Naruto looked indignant. Hell no. It's bad enough that he's trying to get me to admit that I dash. Naruto's mouth shut tight, and he looked away in embarrassment. Tenten looked at him curiously. Admit? Admit what? Naruto's thoughts derailed, and he tried to think of an excuse to get out of this line of questioning. However, thinking about it objectively, he was avoiding something that he'd have to think about more as he and Tenten continued to get together at times like these. Swallowing his nervousness, he answered the patiently waiting Kunoichi with a question of his own. Say, Tenten, can you tell me something? If you do, then I'll answer your question. Tenten nodded slowly before shrugging. Sure, go ahead. Naruto decided to try an innocent, indirect way of asking. Did you find any guys at the academy attractive when you were there? Tenten cocked her head to the side. What? Naruto turned his head away in embarrassment. A stupid question, really. The bun-haired girl didn't rebuke him for asking it, though. It really caught her off guard. She shrugged before answering. Well, it's certainly something I wasn't expecting. She sighed. I don't really know how to answer it because I can't tell you if there were any boys I thought looked good. I wasn't looking in the first place. Naruto exhaled a sigh of relief. Because you want to become a serious shinobi, right? Tenten nodded. There were a lot of girls in the class who did like to look for and talk about those things, but it didn't interest me. Tenten chuckled dryly. Why are we talking about this again? Naruto smiled ruefully. I guess it's because... He took a breath. I'm interested about you. Tenten looked at him in silence before a teasing smile spread across her face. Naruto Uzumaki, are you trying to put the moves on me? Naruto's face turned beet red before he looked at the table and started stammering. Why not? You're pretty, smart, and the toughest girl I know. Now it was Tenten's turn to erupt in an embarrassed shade. By the time the waitress came back to refill their beverage pitcher, the two hadn't spoken a single word to each other and were avoiding eye contact. Tenten was the one to break the silence. You've impressed me too. Naruto looked up so fast it was amazing he didn't suffer whiplash. Huh? Tenten sighed as she leaned back in her chair and stared up at the ceiling. Your drive to improve, your eagerness to take in everything that I taught you, and how you stuck with it. She looked at the blonde teen in the eyes as she smiled. You're amazing, Naruto, and a very nice guy. Naruto ended up smiling with her, and the two stayed that way, smiling as they looked at one another. However, it was broken by a trio of voices at the table behind Tenten. I'll bet you they're not real, said a voice, a male speaker. Of course they're real. Why are you even asking that? Came a girl's bewildered voice. Some people might emphasize themselves by adding them. Came a bored voice. I'm going to feel them. I'll prove to you they're fake. Came the first speaker's voice, determined. Wait, you shouldn't dash, warned the girl. Suddenly a pair of small hands came and firmly grabbed the hair buns on Tenten's head and started tugging upwards. Tenten closed her eyes before she ground out. Let go of my hair. She then swung her elbow behind her into the gut of the person who let go of her buns as he clutched his stomach in pain just as he fell to the floor. Naruto looked on in tired exasperation as he saw that it was none other than Kinomaru, whose friends Udon and Moegi went to his aid. After the three kids apologized for intruding on their meal, Naruto and Tenten left Yukoniku's in a more solemn mood. However, after a point of putting some distance between them and the barbecue place, Naruto finally spoke. I didn't answer your question on what that Gai Sensei of mine was trying to get me to do. Tenten sighed. Let's leave it for another time. She then smiled and slugged Naruto in the shoulder playfully. I had a really nice meal with you, Naruto, despite the sideshow that came with it. Naruto grinned. It wasn't too bad. Meanwhile, on the other side of the village, Kakashi Itaki was humming happily to himself as he read his favorite book while walking to the bar to Ave to some drinks with his fellow jounin. Having just finished preparing his female student, Sakura, for her match against the Aburame boy, he was due for some downtime. Turning a page of his book, his lone eye came up and he saw a pig in a vest running towards him in a panic as some little kids chased after it with sticks. Behind them, the pig's owner, a medium-height woman with brown hair, was calling for both the pig to come back to her and for the kids to stop harassing it. In one fell swoop, Kakashi saved the piglet and then performed the body flicker technique, disappearing from the confused children and reappearing behind the woman, who caught sight of him, and the two then went out of earshot of the children. Thank you for saving Tenten, Kakashi-san. The woman smiled brightly. Handing over the pig, Kakashi did his eye smile. All in a day's work. He then looked at her curiously. I am surprised to see you here in the village, Shizen. Shizen nodded. Well, my master disappeared on me a while back, and I've been trying to find clues on where she's gone to. Kakashi looked surprised. They brought you here? Tsunade-sama is in Konoha. Shizen nodded. I overheard some gamblers talking about a woman matching her description asking about the betting pool in this year's Chunin exams. Shizen sighed. No matter how many times I try to make her stop, she still does gamble. Shizen then asked Kakashi to let her know if he sees or hears about the slug Sannin, as she imagines that her master was probably roaming around in some sort of disguise. The next day, the finals of this year's Chunin exams came into full swing, and the attendees lined up to the gate while some of the gamblers lined up to the betting booths. Swanda, leaving one of them, considered thoughtfully on who she decided to bet on just on a whim. The blonde Uzumaki kid was the dark horse contender in this, as he wasn't someone of prominent clan status, nor was he a powerhouse, so he wasn't the odds-on favorite. However, due to nostalgia over the people who she remembered being the boy's parents, she decided to do something she normally avoided doing: bet on emotion. She reflected on this as she got to her seat in the arena. At the start of the finals, Gunma Shiranui, the new proctor filling in for Hate, made the announcement of the start and a call for Naruto Uzumaki and Niji Hyuga to come to the arena floor. Niji walked down with unperturbed confidence, while Naruto had a look of fierce determination. As the boys stood apart, waiting for the signal of the match, in the stands there was chatter of anticipation. Many were of the notion that Niji was to win this with no trouble because of his clan and being a former prodigy. However, there was a growing interest in Naruto, as he had surprised many by his newfound skill with a sword and his tactics in beating Kankuro of Suna. Among those of the competing boys' age group, it varied as well. He got lucky last time. This time he might not. Ino stated next to Sakura. Naruto's pink-haired teammate shrugged. I wouldn't bet on anything just yet. Over in another section, sitting with her father and younger sister, Hinata closed her eyes and made a silent prayer. Tenten, with her teammate, Rock Lee, watched with interest and decided on not siding with either contender. Now, Gama raised his voice, the Senbon needle in his mouth rolling to the corner of his mouth, but not falling out. First match, Naruto Uzumaki versus Niji Hyuga. Start! He then leapt back as Naruto used 6 Kagebunshin and, using his clones in tandem, drew their swords as they attempted to surround Niji. Niji calmly and effortlessly dodged Naruto's clone slashes and delivered strikes which dispelled them. Naruto, the original, created 2 more and had them turn their swords into the Nodachi form and attack the Hyuga prodigy in a pincer maneuver. Niji, calmly, activated his Byakugan and took out a kunai to block the overhead swing from behind him, and then pivoted to avoid the frontal assault in front of him before dispelling both clones and began running toward the original Naruto. Naruto, amazed by the speed and tenacity of the older boy, waited till Niji came into range before feeding chakra into his sword, bringing out the flame form, and made a horizontal slash to push the Hyuga away. Niji, however, dropped to the floor and performed a leg sweep which tripped Naruto, and it caused him to fall on his back. Niji capitalized on this and struck out at the chakra points on the blonde sword arm, canceling out the chakra feeding the sword. Then he kicked the sword out of Naruto's hands and was about to make another strike to the Uzumaki's other chakra points, but Naruto aimed a kick upwards and managed to hit Niji below the chin, causing his body to go backwards and stumble. Naruto, taking the advantage, got back to his feet and tried to put some distance between them as Niji recovered. Niji, rubbing his chin, stared down at Naruto. Why do you fight? This match has already been decided, now that I have incapacitated you. You can't feel your arms, right? Naruto nodded but still smirked. Yeah. So what? Niji sighed. It means that the fight will end in the next couple of moves. You have no hope and are fated to be defeated by me, someone who you never had a chance against. Naruto scoffed. Who died and made you Kami? Fate is something you make for yourself. Niji said no more and once again settled into the gentle fist form. You're in my range of divination. Niji suddenly appeared in front of Naruto, but before he could strike, Naruto's spiky blonde hair suddenly grew and wrapped around the boy with the spiky hair, with the strands of hair turning into sharp spikes protruding from the sides. Niji, caught unaware, grunted in pain as he now had multiple cuts all over his hands and knuckles. In the stands, a murmur of amazement stirred about at the change of pace and the jutsu that the seemingly incapacitated Naruto performed. Chiefly among those was Hayashi Hyuga, clan head, watching his nephew who was about to perform a main house form, the Gentle Fist, which he wasn't supposed to know, but was now even more astounded by the Uzumaki boy's counter. Back on the arena floor, Niji went farther back, scowling as he looked at his now bleeding hands before looking to his opponent, whose hair was thinning back to its normal length. "Why?" Naruto, whose hair was now back to normal, said, "Why what?" Niji grit his teeth. "Why are you trying so hard to defy your fate?" Naruto cocked his head. "What I want to know is why you're so determined to be called this so-called fate's bitch. What's up with you?" Scowling, Niji took off his headband, revealing a seal across his forehead. This is why. Everyone born into the branch house of the Hyuga clan is fated to be branded with this seal that kills you slowly should you fall out of line. We're fated to be beneath those who lord over us. Even my own father couldn't defy his fate to take the place of the clan head when another village asked for his head. A quiet, uncomfortable silence washed over the audience. However, Hayashi was closing his eyes in thought. Naruto, having already heard of this story from Hinata, but not of the particulars, felt taken aback. However, something came to his mind that he wanted to point out. "But why aren't you fighting back? You're already by showing how strong you are, right? Hinata wants to reach out to you, and maybe together you could change the way of your clan. When I become Hokage, I could help both of you." Now it was Niji's turn to be taken aback, but stubbornness dies hard, and he rushed to re-engage with the blonde teen as he threw out a kunai at the boy. Naruto, not really surprised that Nijin didn't want to talk anymore, took out one of his kunai, knocked away the projectile weapon, and started feeling the Kyuubi's chakra, opening up the chakra points on his arms that Niji had previously closed. Watching with his Dojutsu, Niji was mesmerized by the weird second chakra circulating in the boy's body from a seal that the other teen had on his stomach. He couldn't fathom what he was seeing. Naruto, now having his arms back in use, poured his own chakra into them and focused on molding it into a long, hard, stretchable chains which he then cast out using the same method that Yugao had taught him using chakra strings. These chains wrapped around Niji's arms tightly. Niji, unsure of what exactly he was seeing, but now in a gritted panic, tried to dislodge his arms from these confines. However, his blonde-haired opponent then pulled on his end with surprising strength, causing the Hyuga prodigy to come rocketing to him. Naruto then drew back his hand in a fist and punched hard against the Hyuga's jaw, causing him to bounce several times against the ground before he stopped. The chains dispersed, but Niji couldn't make any move as he didn't have the strength for it. However, he was awake, and as he heard Naruto's name called out as the winner of the match, he saw the boy looking down on him silently before he said, "You know, I was unable to make a proper bunshin to pass the academy 3 times. I had to get help in order to get this far. If you, who doesn't have these holdups, can go as far as you have, there's no way fate or anything else can hold you back either." Niji didn't reply, be it lingering stubbornness or that he was in such pain. He couldn't tell. He heard Genma remarking to him that even a caged bird will continue trying to peck its way free until it's finally able, before he was carted away by the medic means. In the stands, Hinata silently thanked Naruto for what he said to her cousin, while her father silently left the stands to talk to his nephew. Tenten, smiling, also gave her unheard thanks to the blonde for giving something her teammate could strive for. The clamor over Naruto and Niji's fight was loud and abundant before the start of the next match. The village misfit, the unspoken Jinchuriki, had beaten someone of clan status. Not only that, his methods and the jutsus he used had shocked those who recognized the two of them. One man in particular was intrigued. That blonde brat has real Uzumaki genes in him. Orochimaru thought to himself, hiding in his disguise. I might have to include him among those I plan to harvest once this invasion is over with. Meanwhile, Jiraiya, having watched his new student's victory from the stands with satisfaction, was taking a breather outside, and he soon looked astounded when he suddenly recognized someone in the crowd at the betting booths. In a disguise of her own, but not as well thought out, Jiraiya walked toward his fellow Sannin as she was eagerly counting her winnings. "Time? You've come back to Konoha." Tsunade's head snapped up and she grunted in exasperation. "No, I haven't, and don't tell Sensei that I am here, you pervert." Jiraiya smirked. "What makes you think he doesn't already know?" Tsunade decided to change the subject, hoping to end their conversation and to get back to the arena. "I noticed that jutsu you created being used by that Uzumkai boy. Are you to take on another student?" Jiraiya nodded. The kid's got potential. Tsunade smirked. "Well, he's definitely good enough for me to make some quick cash. Tell him to keep it up. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to see how the rest of my bets are holding out." Jiraiya watched her leave and thought for a moment of trying to rope her in on dealing with the potential attack that might be happening in the village. However, knowing her disposition, he knew she would probably leave the village once the fighting happened, or even sooner should he, or their sensei, try to corner her. Like it or not, it'd be best to leave Tsunade to her own methods and just do what they can with those they have already. With that in mind, Jiraiya started heading back to the arena to check for any sleeper agents from Suna or Odo. The match that followed Naruto and Nijis was Sakura versus Shino Aburame. While not as heated or emotionally driven as the previous bout, there was plenty of spectator intrigue, as it was another case of a non-clan fighter versus one of clan status. However, it didn't last nearly as long as its predecessor. Sakura had made a foolish attempt to start the match by making a charge at the boy and ended up colliding with his bug clone. The insect soon drained her of her chakra to the point she passed out, thus making Shino the winner. The next match had Kiba Inuzuka being pitted against Ino Yamanaka. This too was a rather short fight, as Ino was quicker than Kiba to act and possessed him with her clan jutsu. Having him place his kunai to his throat ended the match in her favor. Soon, after a smug Ino left the arena and a scowling Kiba exited, the fourth match was announced. Tenten walked down to the arena floor with her heartbeat echoing in her ears as she met with Gaara. The boy met her gaze with a hard stare that unnerved her slightly, but she swallowed her nervousness and recalled all the methods Anko had drilled into her to help her win this match. Gamal looked between the two before calling the start of the match. As soon as he leapt aside, Tenten flung a kunai at the red-headed boy, who swatted it away with sand that came out of his gourd. Tenten, along with her temporary instructor, Anko, figured that the boy had a control over the sand in his gourd and willed it to a frightening degree. Knowing this, Tenten started the next phase of hers and Anko's plan. Tenten grabbed one of her scrolls, flung it up in the air, which then unsealed a series of kunai with explosive tags attached to them. They landed in a circle around Gaara, who eyed them suspiciously before Tenten triggered them, causing a series of small explosions. The audience waited with suspense along with Tenten, and when the dust settled, it showed to the amazement of everyone that the boy was unharmed. However, Tenten noticed that it seemed Gaara's face, which seemed to have sand falling off in places. This looks promising. It looks like he uses sand as a type of armor as well, but it doesn't look unbreakable. That's good, Tenten thought to herself in relief. Gaara, meanwhile, was looking at Tenten with boredom, and he raised his hand and sent a tendril of sand rushing towards her. Tenten immediately used the substitution jutsu with the kunai she had used earlier and got out of harm's way. From there, she unsealed another kunai with an explosive tag and flung it near the back of the red-haired boy's head before triggering the tag. Gaara was then jolted forward by the blast. Up in the stands, watching, Kankuro and Temari were watching anxiously. While they didn't believe this girl could at all actually hurt their brother, seeing the usual way she attacked him and that Gaara was not immediately ending this match and the girl's life, had them troubled. Naruto was also holding his breath. He could now see what had Tenten so worried about this opponent. Yet his gut told him that what they were seeing was only scratching the surface. Dodging another wave of sand by using a shuriken she had used earlier for substitution, Tenten was starting to lose steam with the constant dodging. Gaara was starting to use his sand to knock away any projectiles with tags attached to them, so the weapons enthusiast was trying to think of another alternative. Anko had suggested poison being an option, but it wasn't something Tenten's father carried in their store, and she wasn't able to find a place to get some within the village before her match. She knew she was running out of options. However, before anything could be attempted, The entire arena erupted in fighting as loud explosions erupted all around. Tenten, halting by surprise as she recognized the genjutsu that came from feathers floating down, soon found her ankle grasped by Gaara's sand. Remembering the fates of the two Oto genin, Tenten struggled in getting her feet free as the sand was crawling up her legs. Naruto, who had been abruptly awoken from the genjutsu, looked around in a stupor at what was happening around him. He was shaken from his delirium when he heard Tenten's cry of pain and saw Gaara encasing her up to her waist in sand. Using the body flicker technique Tenten had taught him, he moved to the arena floor and tackled Tenten to the side, breaking her from the sand mold she was in, unsheathing his sword and assisting the bun-haired girl back onto her feet. The two of them had found that Gaara was not alone facing them as his siblings and a man who had half of his face covered. Probably the bastard Sensei, Naruto thought to himself. Hearing Tenten grunt beside him, he looked and saw that her leg was now at an odd angle. Tenten, how bad is it? Tenten squinted as she tried to correct her battle stance. He might have broken something, but nothing special. Naruto nodded, thinking on what the hell he should be doing, as it was obvious that Konoha was under some sort of attack and that these guys were in support of it. Before he could ponder their situation any further, the Sand Trio's sensei gave the three of them orders. Proceed with the plan, Gaara. The two of you protect him like planned, while I handle any distractions. Gaara didn't seem to hear their sensei, as he was gazing still at Naruto and Tenten with a sense of bloodlust. Naruto felt within him something stirring in response to that look. Two figures landed next to Naruto and Tenten, which revealed Mato Gai and Rock Lee. Allow me to assist you in your youthfulness, Naruto-kun. Meanwhile, Jiraiya was with his teacher the Sandaime as Orochimaru. Having torn off his disguise, the face of the recently deceased Kazekage faced them with a singular coffin rising out of the ground. Well, Jiraiya Sensei, seeing as this is a historic reunion, let's invite someone else historic to the table. I'm sure you'll remember him, Jiraiya. The coffin opened and a tall, long-haired man emerged who had a breathing mask on his face and held a kuzurigama, a sickle attached with a chain and a weight at the end. Hanzo, Jiraiya breathed in a whisper. Sarutobi, dressed in his shinobi gear with his staff Enma, also looked perturbed by this development. Hanzo of the Salamander looked around his surroundings before grunting. I recognize you. He turned his head to the side, peering at Orochimaru behind him. And you. The two of you were a couple of the whelps who I recognized and let go. Why bring me here? Orochimaru chuckled. Why? So you can have a bit of fun, of course. He then thrust a kunai with a tag into the back of the head of Hanzo before it was swallowed up. Hanzo soon went rigid before settling into a stance with his weapon. While you play catch-up with our old adversary, Jiraiya, Sensei, and I will get reacquainted as well. While Gai was off in a fight with Baki, the Kazekage's children's sensei, Naruto, Tenten, and Rock Lee were facing off against the Sand siblings with the tension mounting high. Gaara in particular was clutching his head, making ominous mutterings while giving murderous glances at Naruto and Tenten. Gaara, we need to head to the designated area, Kankuro whispered to his younger brother. Gaara ignored his brother's urging and sent a surge of sand from his gourd at the rookie Konoha swordsman and the injured Kunoichi, while ignoring Rock Lee. Temari took that as her cue, and she launched into a wind jutsu against the three. Naruto immediately scooped up Tenten and dodged both the jutsu and the sand, while Tenten threw a shuriken while forming the hand signs for the Kage Shuriken no Jutsu that Anko had taught her among her other teachings. The shuriken multiplied into 50 shuriken. Gaara blocked some with a sand barrier while his sister knocked the others away with another wind jutsu. Gaara's control over himself was slipping as he clutched his head, as the sand was soon wrapping around his arms and legs, turning into a grotesque image. Shit, it's starting too soon. Temari, what should we dash? Kankuro was interrupted when Lee delivered a roundhouse kick at the boy, causing him to block him. Temari was about to assist her younger brother when Gaara made a beastly guttural roar. Sand exploded from his gourd, shooting sand projectiles in every direction. Then with a crazed look he chased after Naruto, who was still carrying Tenten in his arms. Naruto, we need to get far from here. There's something incredibly wrong about that guy. Naruto nodded. knowing that something inside him, probably the Kyuubi, felt something about the boy as well. Thus, the two of them ran out of the arena with Gaara hot on their trail. Jiraiya dodged the weighted chain, headed his way as Hanzo made his mindless pursuit of him. All the while, Jiraiya watched anxiously as his sensei fought with his attacker, his ex-student Orochimaru. Turning back to his opponent, he grew his hair into sharp spikes, and then sent hundreds of needles from that hair at his foe, but Hanzo dodged to the side and then threw the blade of his sickle at Jiraiya. Jiraiya, knowing the poisonous element of that weapon, had his hair swallow him up and blocked the weapon. How do we get out off this? Jiraiya thought to himself. Naruto was of similar thoughts as a tentacle of sand snaked its way around his feet, causing him to fall down with Tenten coming tumbling out of his grasp. Flipping over, he drew his sword and channeled chakra through it, and with a burning slice freed himself. Gaara, then, came crashing through the trees more than 4 times his size, encased in sand. Uzumaki! Tenten paled as she saw what he was slowly becoming. But she wasn't granted the luxury of thinking on it any further as Gaara was increasing his size and threatened to crush her underfoot. Forming the hand signs for the body flicker technique, she barely escaped, but soon found a wind jutsu slamming into her and sending her far away from Naruto and Gaara. When she came to a skidding stop, Temari revealed herself breathing hard but smirking. While the boys play, I'll get my little payback on you. You damn Konoha Nin. Tenten huffed. Bitter much? Weren't you the one who got the last word in? Well, whatever I have is just enough reason to make you feel some pain as well. Konoha is not going to lose today. Meanwhile, Naruto, while worried about what happened to Tenten, was forced to deal with Gaara suddenly going into a slumber and his sand monstrosity suddenly coming to life. Finally, I'm free. The towering sand monster was in the shape of a one-tailed tanuki. Its eyes soon set on the village of Konoha and made its lumbering direction there. Naruto, dumbfounded by what he was seeing, soon snapped out of his stupor and thought desperately about what he could use. At first, he thought of the toads, but knowing that he wasn't able to summon anything larger than Gamakichi, knew it wouldn't help in this situation. Then what could he do? What were his options? Konoha, his friends, his senseis, all of them were in danger. Even Tenten. Naruto thought desperately. Suddenly, a deep, sinister voice echoed throughout his mind. Weak, pathetic, human. What can you hope to do without the assistance of those better than you? Naruto knew instinctually that voice, though this was the first time it was given such loud volume. The Kyuubi? If you're talking, then now is the perfect time. Oh, perfect time for what, fool? The Kyuubi sneered. To have you give me what you owe. Give me some of your strength, bastard. Naruto could feel the Kyuubi bare its fangs deep inside him. Why would I do that, human? Because, for better for worse, we need each other, you stupid fox. The Kyuubi was quiet, but after some time, and as Gaara's transformed form was gaining towards its goal, it seemed to make a decision. Just this once, Naruto, feeling the demonic chakra flow within him, increased his speed till he gained upon the monster. Then, feeding the Kyuubi's chakra, along with his own, into his sword, he made a large swipe of his blade, causing a tidal wave of flame cut through the entire body of the Tanuki sand being. The body, being sliced diagonally across, fell sideways with the monster screaming. What? Naruto didn't stop there, as he did many more flame slashes until the body was reduced to Gaara's slumbering form. As the sand tried desperately to gather and reform itself, Naruto punched Gaara across the face, causing the boy to awaken and for the creature to scream in anguish as it was silenced. Tenten grimaced as she nursed the bleeding gash across her cheek. Temari, in the meantime, was looking smug as she readied another wind jutsu. Suddenly, however, she turned away from Tenten, and her demeanor changed from smug to panic as she yelled, "Gaara!" and took off, leaving Tenten recoiling from the tension of their one-sided fight. Struggling to get to her feet, despite the injury to her left one, Tenten gave a small smile of relief. Naruto readied his sword as Gaara backed off wearily. Why? Naruto halted from moving forward as he cocked his head to the side confusingly. Why what? Gaara grit his teeth. Why are you denying me my existence? Naruto sighed. That should be obvious. You're trying to harm my home and the people I care about. Besides, Gaara slumped down to the ground out of exhaustion, but looked inquiringly at Naruto. Why what? Naruto sighed. I could have become like you, Gaara. I needed to stop you from yourself. Gaara looked bewildered. Why? Suddenly, Temari burst in on the scene and put herself between Gaara and Naruto. Gaara, because someone might feel sad losing you to what you might be becoming. Naruto answered. The fighting had stopped at the beginning of the morning, with most of the forces of the Suna and Odo siege being completely annihilated. Stragglers fled and numerous had been captured. While most of Konoha's forces had managed to survive, the greatest loss was that of the Sandaime Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, who died in his fight against Orochimaru. The funeral service happened in the morning amidst the heavy rainfall, which seemed to represent everyone's feeling. Konohamaru wept sadly into a relative's side, while everyone else looked at the flowered mound in quiet solitude. Naruto was silent, but inside was deep in grief. All the memories of his Jiji, taking him to Ichiraku's, and the encouragement from the man when he decided to become a shinobi for the village, and finally to their discussions about his parents recently, made the loss deeper. Soon, a calloused yet soft hand wrapped around his and gave a gentle squeeze. The village's recovery after the invasion by the forces of the villages of Suna and Odo was progressing smoothly. Rubble was being removed daily, and the overall total of loss to both the citizenry and the shinobi was less than predicted. Tenten, after having her leg healed, helped with her team scouting the area for hidden traps laid by the retreating foes. Her teammate Niji was instrumental in uncovering these with his Dijitsu, while her other teammate Lee was busy relaying information about these traps with the Umbu patrolling. Tenten, in the meantime, had the duty of safely disarming these traps. While there was an importance in these tasks, the weapons enthusiast's mind lay elsewhere. That's the last one of this area. Report this to Gai Sensei and the Umbu Lee. Niji instructed his teammate. Lee gave a crisp salute before running off, leaving his two teammates alone. Niji watched as Tenten carefully raised a tripwire with a kunai before disarming the trap underneath. It was smooth work of hers, and she did it with no problem. However, he could tell that something was on her thoughts, and more than likely it was involving that boy. Recently, after recovering from his loss against Naruto and having a heartfelt understanding with his uncle, the head of the main house, the prodigious Hyuga had an epiphany and was slowly changing from the person he had once been. Arrogance, bitterness, and ego were leaving him and had him coming to understand things, which was leading to some acceptance. One of those things was the opponent who had beaten him and, in turn, helped beat some sense in. He was also now less critical of his teammates' activities with him, having found some respect for the blonde teen. Thus, he decided to address Tenten's problem now. You can go see him if you want to. We're at a good stopping point anyway. Tenten's head jerked up, and then she smiled bemusedly. Am I really that obvious? Niji got up and stretched before turning and walking away, calling over his shoulder, Go see him. It'll probably do you both good. Jiraiya, while nursing a swollen, discolored part of his skin, on his right side, listened impatiently as Danzo and Hamura were having a disagreement. We need strong leadership in this village, and the council has already voted on Tsunade being the next Hokage. What more is there to discuss on? We should discuss whether we should leave the village in the hands of someone qualified or someone who is, at best, mediocre. That woman, even if she should come here of her own volition, is a poor choice. The bandaged warhawk grumbled before gazing at the advisor with not too subtle hinting. Hamura sighed. We can leave recruiting her to Jiraiya-kun here. As to her abilities, she more than fits the requirements, and it was in Sarutobi's own wishes that she might succeed him. We must honor that in any way we can. Danzo grunted before he stalked out of the room, leaving Hamura alone with Jiraiya, who was still preoccupied by the injury he got from Hanzo's sickle. You can find her, right? Hamura asked Jiraiya. The toad Sanine nodded. She usually leaves a trail. Besides, it hasn't been that long since she left before the invasion started. He then stretched and turned to leave, but then looked over his shoulder. By the way, there are 2 genin I want to accompany me when I go out to look for her. Naruto was sitting on the stool at the Ichiraka stand slurping noodles, but with less enthusiasm than he normally did. He and his team had finished with their task of looking for survivors under collapsed dwellings. Luckily, there were more people alive than there were crushed bodies, but the sight alone and the energy he put in to help unearth those poor people had almost killed his appetite. That and, well, the fresh passing of the Sandaime Hokage. Konohamaru hasn't shown himself around Naruto for a while now. For some time, Naruto had isolated himself as well, so he understood his protege's grief. Picking up the bowl and drinking away the broth of the ramen dish, Naruto gave a quiet thank you to Ayame and Teuchi before leaving the stand and beginning his trek home. However, halfway there, he suddenly felt a desire to go anywhere but where he was headed. Looking up into the sky for some clue as to where he wanted to go, he waited patiently for something to occur to him. You know, I've told you this once before, but you really will get covered by bird crap if you just stand there all day. Naruto closed his eyes and smiled, despite himself. Now, where have I heard that before? Turning around, the blonde saw the bun-haired kunoichi standing there with a grocery sack slung over her shoulder smiling at him. "You look lost," she said. "I feel lost," he confirmed, sighing. Tenten nodded before gesturing him over in the direction she was going to go. "In that case, come with me for a bit." The two then walked through the village for a bit with neither of them starting a topic of discussion until they had finally arrived at an area near Tenten's father's weapon shop where the ground was bare. Naruto stared at the area for a moment before Tenten took out some cartons out from the grocery bag she had brought with them and opened one up, taking out 2 skewers that had multicolored dango on them and put one in her mouth before handing one to Naruto. "Here." Naruto took the treat before sighing and starting to eat it. "Why all this?" Tenten smiled. "A change of scenery. Besides, it's been 3 months since we used this area to train you on how to hold a sword." Naruto's eyes widened, looking around before coming back to Tenten, who smiled at him warmly. He then closed his eyes and chuckled. "A bit early for an anniversary, isn't it?" Tenten shrugged, smiling still with the skewer in her mouth. Naruto huffed in amusement before putting on a natural smile as Tenten offered him another dango skewer. "Why all the dango, though?" he asked. The kunoichi turned her head away and sighed, tiredly. "That damn woman got me eating them a lot. Now, they're hard to turn away from." Naruto assumed she meant Anko, the exam's second proctor and Tenten's temporary sensei, who volunteered herself to train her. From what Naruto had overheard, Anko was enthusiastic about having a new student to teach her methods to. Luckily, she didn't have a lot of time to continue teaching Tenten. Otherwise, Naruto doubted his friend would keep her sanity. After disposing of their used skewers, they were soon approached by Jiraiya, much to both of their surprise. "Here you two are. I've been looking all over. You two, packed for a 2-week journey. You're both coming with me." While Tenten looked surprised, Naruto was a tad bit suspicious. "I hope it isn't for your research, Ero-senin." Jiraiya sighed. "Listen, brat, I may be a super pervert, but I know when to pace myself." Seeing his new student about to open his mouth to argue about that point, Jiraiya interrupted him. "But besides all that, this is a mission we've been handed. We're going to bring in my other teammate to be the next Hokage." Meanwhile, in a hidden base near Otogeikure, a red-haired teen girl wearing a purple bandana head cover and dressed in a white GI with a tied purple rope motif grumbled to herself as she made her way down the winding labyrinth-like corridor before arriving at a room that held medical equipment. Inside, a bespeckled white-haired teen was having a discussion with their leader who was being treated. "I'm afraid, Orochimaru-sama, that the only person who can treat your arms is someone of Tsunade's caliber." "I anticipated as much." Kabuto Sensei seemed to keep his sense of humor as to how he would punish me before he died. "But no matter. Tayuya, you may come in, please." Kabuto turned and smirked as he pushed up his glasses as Tayuya of the Sound 4 walked inside and knelt in submission before the snake Sannin, completely ignoring Kabuto in the process. Said man chuckled to himself as he left the room. Orochimaru waited until Kabuto was out before he gave the young girl his new orders. "I'm going to have you stand watch at a distance while I recruit my former teammate. I sense there will be some interference from those who will come from Konoha, possibly my other former teammate." Tayuya said nothing, still keeping her head bowed. Anyone coming with him, possibly that new student of his and any others, Do not hesitate to slaughter them and retrieve their corpses for new specimens. Yes, Orochimaru-sama. She finally spoke, much to Naruto's relief. Jiraiya seemed to be focused on the mission, so there was almost no teasing or mentions of the Toad Sannin's perversion. Well, almost. Jiraiya had been staring at Tenten, writing in his little notebook, which almost went unnoticed by the kunoichi until he let out a perverted little giggle. Then a kunai came ripping through the middle of the notebook, and the blade then buried itself right between Jiraiya's legs near his groin. The self-proclaimed super pervert shuddered as he looked over to where Tenten was seated, who was twirling another kunai in one hand while doing maintenance on her tonfas with the other. "Shouldn't you be treating your superiors with a little more respect, girlie?" he complained. Tenten turned to him and gave him an almost Anko-like sweet grin. "Of course I respect you, Jiraiya-sama. So much so, I decided to miss on purpose. My, aren't you the lucky one?" Naruto felt a little shudder run down his spine. However, his new sensei recovered quickly and got them rolling and back on the road again. With the Ika rider's eyes on the road ahead, Naruto turned to Tenten. "This is the first mission I've been away on since Wave. Do you and your team go out a lot?" Tenten nodded. "Not always, but our team specializes in speed, so we end up doing a lot of information protection missions." Naruto nodded, then thought for a moment. "I wonder what my team's specialty is then." Tenten shrugged. "I can't say. Whereas you and the Uchiha on your team emphasize on fighting, the girl on your team is kind of a support, I guess. How does she normally get used in missions?" Naruto opened his mouth to give an answer, but soon shut it as one didn't come up. Jiraiya didn't make any comment either, but whether he was listening to this conversation or not, the two teens couldn't tell. In a town with a large gambling casino, Tsunade was at the blackjack table, finding to her utter joy she was winning steadily. Shizen was securing them a room, and Tsunade lied to her, saying she was off to find some good reading material, and then slipped inside the casino when she was out of sight. Now, feeling utterly giddy after dodging her earlier misfortune of leaving behind her winnings when Konoha had gotten invaded, and being back on the winning streak, she decided to head to another table when she suddenly spotted someone she did not want to see at this time. The first town they came upon had some underground gambling rings, to which Jiraiya said was a good indicator that his teammate, Tsunade, would have visited at least once, twice if she managed to win. Granted the name, the legendary sucker, by the people she gambled with. Her losses and the amount of debt she left behind was the reason behind the name. This town she had spent a couple of days in before she and her young attendant, who Jiraiya said was her student, Shizen, left quite suddenly. Thus, Naruto, Tenten, and Jiraiya didn't stick around and left to the next town, continuing the search. At the next village, which had a festival currently in progress, turned out to not have her there either. However, unlike the previous town, Jiraiya decided they would stay here for the night before going on to the next place. Naruto knew it was more for the large onsen that had attracted him to the place more than anything. Though, despite the sightseeing that his new sensei wanted to do, Naruto and Tenten were eager to sleep indoors for a change. At the inn they checked into, Jiraiya was organizing his sightseeing gear before he turned around and addressed the student, while Tenten was currently out of the room and out of earshot. "Well, Brad, I'm going to be away for a while. Take some time with that girl of yours and see what this city has to offer. Think of it as training." "Training, really?" Naruto deadpanned and then rolled his eyes before sighing. "At least, don't get caught with your research. They might accidentally have the two of us being associated with you. We're going to deny it, you know." Jiraiya scowled before sighing. "Well, in any case, just going out and enjoying yourselves might lead you to hearing some valuable info, which is what I'm going to gather while gaining some research material." The door to their room opened, and Tenten walked in with a dango skewer in her mouth. "So, what's the plan for while we're here, Jiraiya-sama?" Jiraiya walked past her, and then tossed a small bag of Rio at Naruto, who caught it easily. "No plan for now. Have fun, kiddies." Later, on the street, Naruto and Tenten walked down while closely observing their surroundings. The village was celebrating the season by the harvest deity most of the people worshipped. There was a lot of stands filled with various foods, beverages, and assortments of carnival games. Naruto soaked it all in, as this was the first time he was witnessing such a spectacle. Being an orphan and avoiding the celebrations in Konoha because he was ostracized so much because of who he held within him, Thus this had him filled with wonder. Tenten, on the other hand, had a more schooled look. She gave a casual glance at the events, but paid it little mind before she turned to Naruto. So far, all I am hearing is just what's going on at this festival. Want to get something to drink while we try to gain more info? Naruto nodded. He was feeling a little restless by everything going on in this square, and he was also very noticeable because that he was openly carrying his sword while Tenten was seemingly unarmed. The two teens went to a stall and bought some fruit drinks and settled into some chairs that had shaded tables next to them. Sitting down, Naruto noticed that the sun was setting and that the hosts of this festival were lighting paper lanterns, illuminating the area. Some musicians started playing, and an acoustic music accentuated the area. Couples soon entered the space made in front of the musicians and started dancing. Again, Naruto was mesmerized by the sights. His gaze was interrupted by a young teenage girl who shyly came up to their table. Excuse me, but could you dance with me? At first, Naruto didn't think she was talking to him before Tenten stepped on his foot and pointed him at the girl. Blinking owlishly, he shook his head. Sorry, but I don't know how to dance, so I'll pass. The girl shrugged, but went to another table to ask someone else, while Tenten started drinking her fruit juice, looking a bit amused. Well, that ended fast. She then looked at Naruto curiously. Was that true that you can't dance? Or were you just trying to turn that girl down nicely with an excuse? Naruto was jolted out of his observations as he wasn't expecting Tenten asking him a question as she was quiet earlier. Hearing her question, he nodded. Yes to the first part. He then looked at her. How about you? Can you dance, Tenten? Tenten brought out another tray of dango, shrugging. I could do it a little bit. Part of the kunoichi training at the academy was about infiltration and some seduction to be used on missions. So they gave us some dancing lessons. Naruto wondered what was entailed in some of those seduction lessons, but knew he'd be in trouble if he asked. So instead, what were the dancing lessons like? Tenten chewed on her skewer before sighing as she got up. It'd be faster to just show you. Naruto looked surprised as she took his hand and led him to the dance floor. First, she took his right hand and clasped his hand. Now, put your other hand on the small of my back. The Uzumaki teen blinked. What? Like I said, on the small of my back. Tenten said. Naruto cautiously obeyed her instructions and started with his hand on her back and then slowly slid it down. Okay, good. Any farther down and I would have decked you. So remember not to go anywhere else. She grinned. Naruto gulped but nodded. Tenten then put her other hand on his shoulder and then brought their bodies closer together. This kind of contact made Naruto freeze for a moment before he decided to treat it like their sword training exercises, thus turned his eyes to her only to see a bit of a blush on the girl's cheeks. Tenten, he called to her. She blinked and then closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Tenten then instructed him further, sorry. Okay, so listen to the song and try to find the rhythm. I'll lead, so just follow me along. Naruto nodded. With some awkwardness and some stumbling at first, the two shinobi teens managed to find some rhythm and they did a slow waltz to the music. Both started to relax about halfway through. Naruto thought he heard some familiar perverted giggling in the atmosphere around them, but when he turned his eyes away from Tenten and searched for the perpetrator, he couldn't find them. Turning to his dance partner to ask if she heard what he did, he saw that she too was looking at the crowds, concentrating on something. The dance ended as the second musical number came on, and Tenten and Naruto decided to explore some more of the village. Tenten, during that time, gave some sidelong glances at Naruto, and was about to say something when they overheard some drunks complaining about a blonde, pig-tailed woman beating them in a card game in the next town over just an hour ago. Naruto grinned and looked at Tenten. Finally, now where did they pervert dash? Don't you mean super pervert? Tenten sighed, tiredly, before turning to find Jiraiya, grinning naughtily, behind them and suspiciously holding their belongings in his hands. I take it you heard that too, Jiraiya-sama? Yeah, what gives, Ero-senin? How long have you been back there? Naruto said, narrowing his eyes. Don't sweat the small stuff, Runt. We got our lead, and now we need to go. He tossed Naruto and Tenten's belongings to their owner. Once he confirmed that they had them, he led the two teens out of town, all the while grinning. Minato Kushina If only you would have been here to see your son dance his first dance with his girl. In a bar in the town of Kajishiro, Tsunade was peering into her cocktail glass as her student and companion, Shizen, looked on worriedly. A pig dressed in a vest was grunting in restlessness. Tsunade-sama? The granddaughter of the first Hokage closed her eyes for a moment before briefly standing. Pack our things, Shizen. We're gonna change towns. The chestnut-haired younger woman nodded in affirmation and got up to attend her master's orders. As she was leaving, she said over her shoulder, "It wouldn't sit well to treat that man. Please, Tsunade-sama, don't do anything drastic." Tsunade waited until her protege was out of sight before looking at herself and her reflection from the mirror in the back of the bar. An hour before her ex-teammate had arrived and nastily sweet-talked her into hopefully healing his damaged arms he had been inflicted with by their sensei during their final battle with each other. That snake knew how hurt she was, still was, by the loss of her little brother and fiancé stolen from her, by them losing their lives in service to Konoha. Nawak? Tossing the drink down her throat in an effort to stem what was going on within her. When she put the drink down, she found, much to her irritation, that she wasn't alone now. "What brings you here, you old goat?" Jiraiya smirked as he flagged down the bartender and put in an order. "Whatever do you mean, Haim? I'm just enjoying being together with my long-lost love." Tsunade scowled and closed her eyes and huffed. "You're obviously talking about the booze, you old lick. Honestly, first Orochimaru, and now you. Can't all just leave me the hell alone." Jiraiya looked momentarily surprised at the mention of their teammate, but soon it morphed into an exhausted frown. "What's he offering you?" Tsunade ignored him and sipped on her newly poured drink. "Haim, I know you, and I know what you have lost. If that bastard is trying to bring you over to his side with promises of reunions, think again." The healer huffed. "So what if he is? Do you have a say in what I do or don't do, Jiraiya?" Jiraiya took a drink before sighing. "No, you're right, I have no say at all. But I do have to say this. If you side with that snake and attack our village, I will end you. That's a guarantee." "So you say," Tsunade said. Suddenly 2 more people arrived. They actually were teens. One with sun-kissed blonde hair, carrying a sword, and a bun-haired brunette. They joined Jiraiya at the bar with the blonde sighing. "Hey, perverted sensei, instead of trying to pick up women in this filthy place, why aren't we looking for your teammate?" Tsunade looked at the 2 from the corner of her eye before looking forward again. "Hey brat, this is my teammate." "Huh?" Meanwhile, the girl froze with a gaping mouth. "If the Tsunade-sama?" Jiraiya indicated them and introduced them to his teammate. "Tsunade, meet the brat and his girl. We have names, Erosenin. Use them. Anyway, isn't your teammate supposed to be an ancient has-been like you?" Naruto smirked. Tenten facepalmed while Jiraiya went pale as a murderous bloodlust filled the bar, making the scant few other occupiers leave in a hustle. Naruto, obviously not reading the atmosphere, turned to look as Tsunade got out of her seat and gave him a drunken glower. "Say that again if you dare." Unfazed, Naruto looked from her to Jiraiya. "Are you sure this person is who we want as the next Hokage? She's hard of hearing and a withering old drunk on top of it." Tenten sighed and stepped away from the blonde while Jiraiya stepped in between him and his old teammate. "Now, Haim, calm down. The boy's a moron. He doesn't know what not to say." "Both of you outside now," she growled.